I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith.
Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day.
I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's just gone 3 p.m. I will be with you for the next 3 hours, but here is what I've got coming up in the next 60 minutes. So, Boris versus Charles, apparently, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, a big royal rumble. Supposedly, according to reports, Boris Johnson squared up to the then Prince Charles over his opposition to the Rwanda scheme. I'm asking you, you team Boris or your team Charles? In other news, but related though, that migrant boat has arrived apparently. Yes, the Bibby Stockholm is supposedly pulling up around the Dorset area. We'll have some footage of it. We're also going to be talking about whether or not it's actually a feasible plan. Only going to find around 500 spaces for people. Well, that amount arrives every single day, doesn't it? In other news, though, yes, we're also going to be talking about this. Now, with all the talk about GPs receptionists being asked to do more for the GPs and pharmacists being asked to do more for the GPs, are GPs lazy? That's what I'm going to be talking about. And just to wrap us off as well, this is going to be fascinating. Don't take your eyes off this, because this is updating every half an hour or an hour. The Met Police originally had expressed some kind of regret over their arrest at the Coronation, but now, in the last half an hour or so, we've had the top cop at the Met, Mark Rowley, come out and say that they actually did find people who were in possession of things like rape alarms, paint and other devices that could be used to disrupt the proceedings, and they say it's disappointing that they can't share all the info that they have got. So this row rumbles on. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel. Yeah, well, GB Views at gbnews.uk. Get those emails coming in thick and fast. And we have a poll taking place on Twitter right now. Are you Team Boris or Team Charles? That news that Boris Johnson reportedly pretty much squared up to the then Prince Charles, who had called the Rwanda plan appalling. Get your views coming in. Now, though, headlines.
Hello, good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 2 minutes past 3. The Information Commissioner's Office says it will not be taking any action against Lancashire Police over its disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wye in February after a 3-week search. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also says it's identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway, with findings and recommendations due to be published in the autumn. The Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the Coronation after it was criticised for arresting Republican protesters ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrest as unfortunate, but stressed he supports the arresting officer's actions. The force confirmed the individuals face no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. The Prime Minister has today said he supports people's right to protest, but says the new laws are needed to protect against serious disruption. Pharmacists will be able to give prescription medicine without a GP sign-off in the latest government plans to ease the pressure on doctors. Under the measures, patients will be able to get treatments for 7 common conditions, including a sore throat and earache. That's without seeing a doctor. It's hoped the new guidelines, which will come into place this winter, will free up to 15 million slots at surgeries over the next 2 years. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the measures will also help cut waiting times for those seeking medical help.
80% of the country lives about 20 minutes walk from a pharmacy, and for many people they're an easier place to access than their surgery. That's why we're investing more in them and allowing them to do more. And it's not just more medicines that people will be able to get there. They'll be able to get more blood pressure checks or indeed contraception as well. So we're expanding the range of services that people can get from their pharmacies. That's good. It will ease pressure on the system, mean that people can get access to the healthcare they need quicker, and it backs all our fantastic pharmacies as well with extra funding.
NHS GP Anita Raja told us she's sceptical of the new plans.
You know, and I know that at the moment there are so many, hundreds of pharmacies have already closed down. I mean, you know, by the time this is going to be implemented, we may not have a pharmacy near us. So everybody's under a lot of pressure. So we need to really work towards capacity, retrain, recruit, and, you know, and value your healthcare staff.
The former Prime Minister of Pakistan has been arrested in Islamabad as supporters of the politician are being told to shut the country down. Local media say the former cricketer was taken by a paramilitary force from court premises in the capital, where he was taken away under heavy security. It's thought he's been arrested in connection with a corruption case. Imran Khan was ousted from power in a paramilitary vote in April last year. The Prime Minister has rejected claims made by the Russian president that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak says President Putin is the only person responsible for the invasion, that he's called illegal and unprovoked. It follows comments Mr Putin made during a speech at the annual Victory Day parade, where he claimed a so-called real war is being waged and claims his country is defending its sovereignty.
The Western global elites still preach about their exceptionalism. They're pitting people against each other and dividing society, provoking bloody conflicts and coups, sowing hatred, Russophobia, aggressive nationalism, and destroying the traditional family values that make people people. They seem to have forgotten what the Nazis' claim to world supremacy led to, forgotten who defeated this horrible, total evil, who stood up for their homeland and did not spare their lives for the people of Europe.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is in Kyiv for talks with President Zelensky. Her arrival comes after Russia fired cruise missile strikes in Ukraine this morning. Smoke trails from explosions have been seen in the capital, with local officials saying their air defence systems shot most of the missiles down. A marine barge, which will be used to house migrants, has arrived in UK waters. The Bibi Stockholm docked in Falmouth this morning to be refurbished ahead of its use as a housing centre. The 3-storey barge will be used for at least 18 months and can hold up to 500 people as they wait for their asylum claims to be processed. It's part of a government scheme to move asylum seekers away from costly hotel accommodation. Ambulance workers in the southeast are striking today as the union escalates its industrial action. Employed at South Central and South East Coast Ambulance Service NHS Trust will strike until 10 o'clock tonight. Last month, the members rejected the government's offer of a lump sum cash payment and a 5% pay rise. Members of the other health unions accepted that offer. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Now, it sounds like the ultimate clash between Crown and Parliament. Well, former spin doctor to Boris Johnson says that the then PM squared up to King Charles after he criticised the Rwanda refugee plan at the Commonwealth Summit in 2022. But why is this only coming to light now? Well, Number 10's former Director of Communications, Gita Harry, says that Boris went in quite hard against the then Prince of Wales. Boris responded and disputed his long-standing ally's account as inaccurate, with a source saying he deplores any commentary on conversations with the royals. And if it couldn't get any feistier, Mr Harry says that the meeting was less amicable, claiming that the pair clashed over the royals' views on slavery too. Well, a huge barge is set to house hundreds of migrants off the south coast of England. And this ties in, doesn't it, with the Rwanda plan, because this is all supposed to be part of it, part of the big Conservative package to, quote, stop the boat. I've got a poll running on this now, GBNews on Twitter, at GBNews. I want to know, in light of this alleged confrontation between Prince Charles, who said that the Rwanda plan supposedly was appalling, and Boris Johnson, who clearly wanted to implement this, whether or not you are Team King Charles or Team Boris Johnson. And so far, 65.8% of the nearly 2,000 of you who have voted say that you are Team Boris Johnson on this. So let's see how that rumbles on throughout the course of this show. But yes, this barge now, which is part of the old Rwanda scheme in a way, is going to be off the south coast of England. It's now arrived in Falmouth in Cornwall. The Bibby Stockholm is being inspected and refitted before being moved to Portland in Dorset, where it will be used to house around 500 single male asylum seekers. So the plans have attracted criticism from all sides of the debate, and it's been reported that Portland Port has reportedly moved its cruise ship schedule from its website in a bid to deter far-right protests. So, I mean, this is really causing controversy from all angles, because a lot of people who are, you know, on the left or the old Human Rights Brigade, they're sort of saying this is inhumane and we can't put people on a barge like this. Then you've got a local residents and business owners and politicians who are saying we just don't really want this in our area because it might be bad for tourism. Then you have got people towards the right, or dare I say even far right, who are just very angry about this for the obvious reasons. And so no one's really happy, are they? And then you look at the numbers of it, 500 people. Well, this is a drop in the ocean, quite literally, because we have around that arriving on some days every day. With me now to talk about the latest on this is Catherine Forster, our political reporter. Catherine, it's arriving, but it's a bit of a mess.
It is, because basically wherever you try to put these people, they're not wanted. This is the fundamental problem. So it arrived about 8 o'clock in Falmouth this morning. It's going to spend several weeks. It's been towed over from Italy. It's previously been used to house asylum seekers. It's currently got 220 ensuite rooms, a gym, etc. It's going to be refitted to house 500. The Home Office says it's going to provide basic and functional accommodation, including catering, 24-hour security, health care, etc. But already the locals are up in arms. The Conservative MP in Dorset, where it's going to be based just off the coast of Weymouth in Portland Bay, is saying that he's concerned that it'll be in place for years to come. The Home Office is saying 18 months is their working assumption. The leader of the local council, who's also Conservative, is saying that they have severe, serious reservations. So, and this is the problem. Nobody wants these people in their own backyard, but the government is desperate to get that £6 million a day being spent with something like 50,000 asylum seekers in hotels, really keen to get those costs down and ultimately to act as a deterrent, because if you're coming across thinking you're going to be in a quite nice hotel, be free to come and go, a little bit different to you're going to be stuck on a barge off the coast with fairly basic accommodation.
No, absolutely. And so, like I was saying before, this really isn't kind of pleasing anybody, but the barge is arriving. It is now very much in UK waters, and obviously we will be tracking its movements as it eventually gets to the Dorset area. And it's undergoing a couple of renovations, as far as we're aware, as well. But you're right, saying every single place. I mean, the Wirral was mooted to be having a couple of these things, and their MPs there, who are Labour, are dead against it. They're saying they're against it because of the human rights issues. The people around the Dorset area are saying, well, actually, no, we're kind of against it because of tourism and public safety, etc. So no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, then nobody's happy. But the big question for me about all this, Catherine, is if it houses 500 single men, and at the same time that we're not deporting anyone or having any other kind of massive upsurge in processing, I mean, this just doesn't really appear like it's going to work, really. We're going to need a channel full of barges.
Well,
you could walk across.
It's a very, very small part of the whole plan, isn't it? Which, of course, includes Rwanda. Now, if the government wins, you know, the latest legal challenge, that's been going back and forth, hasn't it, for a year in the courts, they're hopeful that come the autumn they will be able to send people out. The illegal migration bill has gone through the Commons. Now it's in the Lords. They're going to face a huge struggle in the Lords to get it through. But they're thinking that come the autumn, they may be able to put people on flights to Rwanda. They may be able to... The illegal migration bill may be law. And at that point, when people are actually being deported on a one-way ticket, the hope is then that the people coming across will decide not to bother.
Look, Catherine, thank you very much. That's Catherine Forshaw, political reporter. So I wanted to start today initially by that news line that Boris Johnson's reportedly essentially squared up to the then Prince Charles, now King Charles, who was, in Boris Johnson's view, was getting involved with the politics of a democratically elected government in a way that any monarch or future monarch should not, is not supposed to do. Supposedly King Charles called the Rwanda scheme awful. That report that appeared on newspaper front pages was not categorically denied or asked to be removed by the palace, which again led Boris Johnson, according to reports, to think that it must have been true. There was supposedly some back and forth on this where he was saying, look, please don't get involved in government policy. I have been asking you whether or not you are Team Charles or Team Boris on this. Again, that poll that's available on our Twitter is now up to 66.9% of you thinking that you're Team Boris. But this is about the illegal migration. So we've got that, we've got the Bibi Stockholm arriving and the 500 single males who are going to be put on that boat. But there are some other immigration figures that I wanted to lead in with today at the top as well as some kind of immigration package, really. This is the legal stuff. So immigration experts are now saying that net migration, these figures are officially due to be published a little bit later this month, but they've given us a bit of a heads up, could hit a record high of 675,000. That, for what it's worth, is double the pre-Brexit peak of 331,000 8 years ago. Experts have suggested that a steep rise in foreign students and humanitarian visas may explain the potential record high for 2023. Now, I'm a little bit sceptical of this because obviously the latest figures the year before also included humanitarian visas, and we've seen Ukraine, we've seen Afghanistan, Hong Kong, and I get that those numbers are still going to be relatively high, but one would have assumed that maybe we'd taken the bulk of those people or already had those visas there. The student visas, again, we've always had a high influx of foreign students, haven't we? A huge number of them. So what's happening, if anything, to mean that those foreign students are now arriving by the hundreds of thousands more? Again, I'm not convinced that that really is the case. The overarching question here, I think one of them anyway, is if you did vote for Brexit, is this really what you voted for? I suspect not. If I was sitting here, however many years ago it was now, and saying to you that now, as of 2023, you were going to be looking at net migration figures that were more than double the pre-Brexit peak of 331,000. Well, maybe you wouldn't have believed me. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But joining me now is researcher at Migration Watch UK. It's Jeremy Hutton. Jeremy, thank you very much for joining us. Look, do you buy the idea that this huge influx in net migration is down to humanitarian visas and students?
It's certainly a factor of it because the number of students coming in has risen quite a lot in the past few years. And similarly, last year in particular, between Ukrainians, people from Hong Kong and a few others, we did allow in a lot of people by humanitarian routes, which completely debunked people who say there's no safe and legal routes, by the way. But we've also got massive work-related immigration. A massive proportion of the people coming to the country, for example, are now care workers, which requires no real qualifications, very little work experience. They can get in, just by putting in a few applications and hoping for the best, really. So work immigration we expect is going to be very high. But the most egregious points of the immigration levels will be dependents. A lot of these students will be bringing family members with them. A lot of these workers will. A lot of these people coming on humanitarian schemes will. Come a few more years down the line, they might bring in an ailing parent from another country as well. So the numbers are going to keep rising and rising and rising until the government actually does something to stop it. And in recent years, there's been no interest from government to do that.
Well, Jeremy, people will be looking at this now and they'll go, well, these numbers are OK because clearly we are attracting doctors, nurses, high-skilled people to come and help our economy. And that, I think, makes it quite palatable to people to think that we've got a high influx of migration, skilled migration that can help grow our economy. Is that true? Is that what we are going to see in these numbers?
Sure, some of the people coming into the UK are skilled workers and they might be fulfilling roles that currently businesses are struggling to fill. However, you've also got, like I said, care workers, you've got journalists, you've got artists. The skilled shortage list allows for a very wide group of occupations, not all of which are necessarily high skilled. When people say skilled workers, they kind of think, doctors, they think architects, they think engineers. But now you've got carpenters and plasterers on the list and things like that, which, sure, they're skilled, but you don't require the same level of competition to fill those roles. We should be filling those jobs, that labour requirement, from the UK workforce.
But what I don't understand, Jeremy, and I haven't been able to understand for quite some time, is that we can see these numbers arriving and we can see the number of people who are claiming asylum, we can see the number of people coming across the channel. And these are two very different things. You've got the net migration figures, which we're talking about now, legal. And then you've got the people coming across the channel, illegal. But we don't really appear to have the room to put anyone, do we? How can we, with our facilities, I'm talking about the NHS later, and GPs having a massive waiting list. I often talk about the schools issues. I often talk about the housing crisis, for example. In fact, a little bit later on, Jeremy, I'm going to be talking about the fact that 700,000 people missed their mortgage or rental repayments this month. And in no small part is that down to, yes, cost of living crisis, but also because there is such a shortage of housing, people can absolutely jack the prices up and people end up with their rent going up by 60-odd% or 70-odd%. And we aren't, I don't think, as a country, able to deal with this amount of people, are we?
No, I think out of all those things you mentioned, which are all absolutely terrific points, to me the housing crisis is the most important. It's the one greatest thing that's stopping people from getting ahead in life and actually leading, I imagine, to a lot of British people emigrating themselves and just giving up on the UK, because at the moment the country doesn't seem like a very prosperous place. I mean, some people are saying that maybe immigration will start falling because the UK just isn't governing itself very well because of these pressures that are put on by immigration. So like you say, we do seem to be at capacity. We're the most crowded country in Europe, well, England is at least, ahead of the Netherlands, ahead of France, ahead of Germany. And it's hard to say how much more the UK can take, because we do seem to be reaching an inflection point where we're going to have to tackle this once and for all and actually stop relying on immigration for all these labour needs.
Yeah, it is a really tricky one. Look, Jeremy, thank you very much as ever. Jeremy Hudson there is a researcher at Migration Watch UK. I wanted to just group together a few of those stories there. Initially, the old Boris Johnson versus the then Prince Charles row, which was supposedly about now King Charles saying that the Rwanda scheme was appalling. Boris getting very worked up about that. Like I said, I've been asking you whose side you're on when it comes to that stuff. But whilst all of this is unfolding, we've also got this Bibby Stockholm barge arriving and undergoing a bit of maintenance before then. Around 500 single men can come on it. That is around the number that arrive very often. I sit here and report about 500 people arriving in a single day. So that's the illegal stuff. And then you look at the legal stuff as well, and that number there is predicted to hit higher, double than the pre-Brexit peak. So we're at about 675,000 people arriving in a single year. And just filling in from what Jeremy was saying there, do you feel as though we are at breaking point or not? Because some people would say, well, we need these people to grow our economy and we just need to get our backsides in gear. We could cope with this if we updated GP surgeries and built more housing and did all of this. Or actually, just is it too much too fast? And what do we do about that? GB Views at GBNews.UK. Get yourself on the telly. Now, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And coming up, we will be discussing Rishi Sunak's plan to expand pharmacy services and allow them to prescribe more medications and perform blood pressure checks. It comes just a day after we were talking about increased phone technology for GP surgery. So you should have to spend less time on the phone for the GP. Now, is this going to be a great thing that will cut down the backlog and get more people fit and healthy? Or is it just sticking plaster politics? And we're just looking at a quick fix here on something that pushes the problem down the road. Why? Because that 240 million quid that we're supposedly spending to get better services for GPs' practices, could that not be spent paying more wages for more GPs? Get your views coming in. GB Views at GBNews.UK. Patrick Christys, Britain's News Channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, nah, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, a potentially very big update to a very big issue for this country. Our healthcare has been in the toilet for quite a long time, and now, hopefully, we can drag it out of there. The Prime Minister has been defending his new plan to free up around 7 million GP appointments a year by allowing people to seek treatment for common conditions at pharmacies. The initiative, costing £645 million, would expand pharmacy services to also allow them to prescribe more medications and perform blood pressure checks. Speaking a little earlier on, Rishi Sunak expressed his hope that the action would help reduce pressure on GP services.
Well, one of my 5 priorities is cutting waiting lists, and today's announcement is getting on with that, and it's about primary care, expanding access to services that people can get from their pharmacy, but also investing in general practices, in surgeries to end the 8 a.m. scramble. Now, when it comes to pharmacies, what we are doing is providing them with extra money so that people can go to their pharmacy and get medicines for common ailments like earaches, sore throats, throat infections, those kinds of things that people will be able to practically go to their pharmacies for, save them a visit or a call to the GP, because everyone loves their pharmacies. I know firsthand, growing up, what a difference they make to people's lives, and it's right that we're backing them to do more.
OK, so it does come after, as Rishi Sunak was alluding to there, this announcement that there's going to be around a £240 million bit of funding to help GP surgeries with more phone lines and up-to-date technology. So the theory is that if you call at 8 a.m, when most of them open, instead of sitting on hold on the phone for hours sometimes, you'll get a call back. You'll then have a conversation with a receptionist who will receive increased training. So they will ask you a bit more detail about yourself, and then they can maybe guide you to a pharmacist as opposed to having to go to see a GP to get a prescription for something that said pharmacist can do. And the grand total of this is nearly around £1 billion. Joining us now with the latest on this is GB News' political reporter. It's Olivia Utley. Olivia, thank you very much. Is this sticking plaster policies, or will this genuinely make a real difference?
Well, on the face of it, it sounds like quite a sensible plan. It could free up to 30,000 GP appointments a day for those people who really, really need them. The issue is, it is a proposal which has been talked about before and has always been shelved at the last minute for a number of reasons. One of them is that pharmacies in the UK have actually been closing at a record rate. Over the last 7 years, we've lost 700 community pharmacies. So there is a question in the air over whether pharmacies actually have the capacity or the staff to deal with a massive uptick in footfall that they can expect to see after this announcement comes to fruition later in the year. Another issue is that traditionally GPs have been the guardians, if you like, of antibiotics. And we know that there is a problem already in this country of antibiotic resistance, antibiotics being overprescribed and people becoming immune to them. That paves the way for big, dangerous superbugs, which can be major killers. So there is a danger of, if pharmacists are allowed to prescribe antibiotics as they like for a range of these common conditions, we could see a problem with oversubscription and superbugs. Another problem, which the King's Health Fund has raised today, is that there could be an issue with people going to their pharmacies with what they believe is a common condition, a urinary tract infection or an earache, getting these quite straightforward antibiotics that the type of antibiotics that pharmacists are allowed to prescribe, those not working for whatever reason because the consultation hasn't been perhaps as rigorous as it might be with a GP, and then those people going back to the back of the queue and causing more of a problem for GPs and obviously impacting their own health in the process. So there are definitely some promising elements to it, and Rishi Sunak is obviously at pains to get rid of this 8 a.m. scramble, which he knows is a massive turn-off for voters, but there are certainly a few flies in the ointment.
There are. Look, Olivia, thank you very much. That's Olivia Utley there, GB News' political reporter. And I think we've identified a potential gap in this. On paper, great. If you've got your... I'm going to rattle off, by the way, some of the conditions now that your local pharmacy should be more able to prescribe without you having to go to a GP. So we've got earache, UTIs, sore throat, sinusitis, infected insect bites, impetigo. There we go. So in theory, if you have genuinely got those things, and they are those things, then you will be able to go and get medication for them quicker and you won't take up a GP appointment's time, and therefore that can speed up the whole process. But the concern will be that if you do have a face-to-face appointment with a GP, they might say, no, it looks like a UTI, but it's actually something more serious, and that could get missed under this current system. But one issue stood out for me, which was your doctor's receptionist is going to have to ask you more questions. And depending on what's wrong with you, that might be quite personal. And I went out and about earlier on and spoke to people to find out whether or not they would feel comfortable talking to a doctor's receptionist about their most intimate problems.
I'm really not bothered. I'm quite open about stuff like that. So, yeah, I guess I'm there to get better. So as long as it leads to me getting better, then I don't care.
And my doctor's surgery actually kind of already does this a bit. And it is awkward saying to a receptionist exactly what you need the appointment for. I don't know. Personally, I would be okay with it because I'm kind of used to it anyway, but I can see how people would find that quite uncomfortable, and it is a bit invasive. There would have to be some sort of agreement in place with the receptionist, like there is with the doctors, like a confidentiality agreement, but I don't know that I would necessarily trust. There's that automatic trust between a doctor, isn't there, and a patient. I don't know if you get that with like a receptionist or someone in a different position.
Depends on the questions, but most likely no. If I'm calling them, I'm expecting someone to be capable and the receptionist to be knowledgeable as well. If they have someone who is just covering the day as a reception, then this won't work because the person won't know how exactly to act on my case.
Because I know it's happening in a few places at home, and it's blocking people from getting appointments.
Why? Because they don't want to?
Yeah, I think, no, I wouldn't really be on for that now.
No.
And yourself?
I'd be the very same, yeah. You know, doctor is private, isn't it? Like, a bit of confidentiality there. Like, when you go to your doctor, should be...
You want to make the appointment, you want to see the doctor.
Well, there we go, a range of views. I think it's going to have an impact in rural areas where there's a small local GP service, and let's be honest, everybody knows each other. And do you really want to call up, you know, Dorothy, you go for a drink with down the pub, and you know is the GP's receptionist, and tell her that you've got something absolutely catastrophic wrong with you? Maybe not. Anyway, don't go anywhere, because up next I will be joined in the studio by Liam Halligan, as around 700,000 households missed mortgage or rent payments last month. What on earth is going on there? But first, it's your latest headlines.
It's 3:32. I'm Tamsin Roberts. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Information Commissioner's Office says it will not be taking any action against Lancashire Police over its disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wyre in February following a 3-week search. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also says it's identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway, with findings and recommendations due to be published in the autumn. The Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the Coronation after it was criticised for arresting protesters from the group Republic ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrest as unfortunate, but stressed he supports the arresting officer's actions. He said suspects were found with bottles of white paint and that there was intelligence to suggest some may use rape alarms or loud hailers during the Coronation procession. The force confirmed the individuals face no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. The former Prime Minister of Pakistan has been arrested by anti-corruption police in Islamabad as supporters of the politician are being told to shut down the country. Footage shows paramilitary troops in riot gear surrounding the former cricketer in court premises. It's thought he's been arrested in connection with a corruption case. The move has led to protests in Mr Khan's hometown of Lahore, and members of his political party are calling for support. Imran Khan was ousted from power in a paramilitary vote in April last year. The Prime Minister has rejected claims by the Russian president that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak says President Putin is the only person responsible for the invasion that he's called illegal and unprovoked. It follows comments Vladimir Putin made during a speech at Russia's annual Victory Day parade, where he claimed a so-called real war is being waged and that his country is defending its sovereignty. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2607 and €1.1503. The price of gold is £1,610 and 22 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,758 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Now, the 100% mortgage is back. Skipton Building Society is set to offer the product to help renters get their first home. But this might lead to people borrowing beyond their means. And it comes as around 700,000 households missed mortgage or rent payments last month. So according to a new survey by consumer group Which, those are the damning stats. Now, joining us now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Yeah, 700,000 people. I mean, I read that headline this morning, and it really brought it home for me, really, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, almost 750,000 people who are in such financial stress, they're missing payments on really big things in their lives, like their mortgages, like their credit card bills. Everyone knows if you miss a payment like that, your credit rating disappears, and so getting credit in the future is going to be a lot more difficult for a long time to come. But what we're looking at today, Patrick, as you say, is this 100% mortgage. Why do we need a 100% mortgage, and what is it? Well, have a little look at this graphic, and radio listeners can bear with us. I discovered this morning that the average deposit for first-time buyers, FTBs in this country, is £62,500. Now, that is a huge amount of money. Who's got 62 grand lying around in their bank account? Yeah. How can you save £62,000 when you're using half your money on rent when you're working really hard? So the average first-time buyer deposit is 62 grand, and that means that most first-time buyers now, they rely on the bank of mum and dad, which, of course, is fine if you come from a family that owns property, but if you don't, then how are you going to get on the property ladder? And that's really kind of socially regressive. So what Skipton, the Building Society, are doing, they're going to offer home loans without a deposit, but they say you need to have shown that you've made 2 years of regular monthly rental payments to demonstrate your kind of reliability and your earning power. And Skipton say that's for those trapped in a rental cycle. So what is a rental cycle? Something to do with getting on the shops on a bike or anything like that. It's the cycle that lots and lots of people are in, where they're working hard, and because they're paying so much in rent every month, they can't save for a deposit to actually start paying their own mortgage rather than someone else's. And Skipton say they want to try and do something about that.
Now, I can see why this might be music to a lot of people's ears. My concern initially on this, and hopefully you can clear this up, would be, well, what's your interest rate going to be on it? And actually, are you then going to end up in a massive hole with a lender like Skipton, and that actual house that you were looking to buy is taken off you? I mean, dare I say, you might even be in a worse position than if you missed a rental payment.
Your instincts are completely right. You know, banks, building societies, they're not altruistic organisations. They're not charities. They're in it to make money, right? And Skipton are saying that they're going to charge on current interest rates, you know, upwards of 5.5%, which is much higher than the regular average variable rate. And if you take this mortgage, you're locked in at that high rate for 5 years. Wow. So there will be people listening to this who'll get together with their partners tonight and say, look, we can actually buy a house, But I would bet a lot of money that in 5 years, interest rates are going to be a lot lower than... Interest rates are about to peak. They might go up again this Thursday when the Bank of England makes a decision, but pretty soon they're going to start coming down again. So they're going to lock people in. And as you say, Patrick, if house prices then fall, you'll be left in this situation which we in the 80s called negative equity. What does that mean? It means your home loan on your house is more than the house is worth. Yeah. So if you sell the house, you've still got a massive debt to pay the mortgage provider, so you can't sell your house. So you're trapped. That is what negative equity is. And my concern is that 100% mortgages at these high rates could lead to that, as well as the issues we had with 100% mortgages before the global financial crisis, where they juiced up the housing market and led to a crash.
And let's say we're 5 years down the line now. Someone's just gone and got a 100% mortgage. They're 5 years down the line. And that lender knows, don't they, that you've not got a huge amount of money probably to fall back on, because they can see what you're paying off your mortgage every single month. They will know exactly what you earn every single month, pretty much. And they will know that you didn't have the money initially to get a deposit. So, presumably, there's no incentive for them to give you a great deal when you come to renew that in 5 years' time.
And they'll... Look, if you're getting 100% mortgage, right, no deposit, it's because you haven't got any family money, right? And that's really bad. The housing market used to be a source of social mobility. People with no wealth, like my parents, they were able, working class people, to get their foot on the housing ladder, which completely changed their life. More financial security, more choices in retirement and all of that. They didn't get any family money, crikey. But if situations now, you have to fall back on the bank of mum and dad. That's going to lead to a huge amount of resentment among young people, because they'll see their contemporaries doing the same amount of work as them, but they can actually own their own house, so they can benefit from house price rises. They're not paying someone else's mortgage. And I do wonder if Skipton are allowed to do this, if the regulator will come under pressure from other banks to let these 100% mortgages go through, even 110% mortgages, where you get lent more than the value of the house, so you can, you know, splurge on widescreen TVs, furniture, and all the rest of it. And the problem with that, Patrick, is that can juice up the housing market, lead to an even bigger bubble, and then ultimately a crash. I don't want to be negative about this. I really want young people to get on the housing ladder if they can. But the way to do that is to build more houses.
Build more houses, 100%. I mean, that actually has been the solution to pretty much everything I've spoken to, one way or another, in this show. Liam, thank you very much. Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor, with On the Money. Now, OK, so on to an outrageous video doing the rounds this morning, showing a now-sacked Starbucks employee accusing a customer of transphobia and then assaulting another. We're going to talk about this on the other side of the break, but I wanted to play you this video. I mean, it is quite shocking. Take a look.
Absolutely not. Don't ever call me transphobic. Ever. You do not know me.
You're being transphobic, Karen. Now get out.
Call me transphobic.
You are transphobic. Now get out.
I want a refund.
You're not having one, dude. Please. Hi, get out.
Absolutely.
You are trespassing now.
They've got cameras.
You are trespassing.
We've
Get
got
out.
cameras.
Get out. You are trespassing.
Apparently, we said something transphobic.
You actually, you
Oof. Yes, well, there we go. More on that a little bit later on. But coming up, though, we will get back to the very latest on the Met Police because their chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has defended the Coronation arrest. He's dropped, as he would see it, truth bombs on the situation that might just quell people who were saying the Met were bang out of order and it was absolutely shocking behaviour. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. We're on Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Barge, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This row was brewing all weekend. It came to a bit of a head yesterday, but there's been some more developments in the last hour or so. The Mayor of London and the Met Commissioner appeared to be at loggerheads this afternoon over those arrests of Republican protesters ahead of the coronation. Now, Sir Mark Rowley has defended his officers for arresting these people, saying that he supports the police officers' actions. But just moments later, Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, wrote to him asking for a review of what happened. Graham Smith is the chief executive of the anti-monarchy group Republic, and one of those who was arrested, he says he will still be taking legal action against the police over his arrest using the new law that was passed days before the coronation about the public order bill. I'm going to go now to Paul Hawkins, who's our national reporter, who's outside Scotland Yard for us. And Paul, Mark Rowley offered what he would obviously feel is a justification for police actions, didn't he?
Yeah, essentially he was saying the police operation was so big for the coronation. We had intelligence that there was a criminal network, that there were fake stewards potentially going to throw bottles of white paint, disrupt the coronation with rape alarms, etc. So we acted on that intelligence. But specifically, this incident with the arrest of this group of protesters from the anti-monarchy group Republic and their CEO, Graham Smith, that's the one that's caused real questions to be asked about how the police interpret the new Public Order Act and also the wording of the legislation itself. Now, they were held for up to 16 hours before being released without charge. They were picked up around 6:40 on the morning of the coronation in a hire van, and police arrested them because they suspected that they were going to use the luggage straps that they had to lock themselves on to inanimate objects, which would be illegal under the Public Order Act. They pointed out that the luggage straps were going to be used to secure placards and nothing to do with locking on. The police said they were acting on intelligence. 16 hours later, they were released without charge. We then get an apology from the Met on Sunday night saying the investigation has been unable to prove intent to use them to lock on and disrupt the event. Then today, we get a lengthy statement from Mark Rowley setting out how big the police operation was, very defensive in tone, saying serious and reliable intelligence told us that the risks were very real. However, on reviewing the evidence, we will be taking no further action. We do not judge that we will be able to prove criminal intent beyond all reasonable doubt. It is unfortunate that the protesters were not able to join the main demonstration. Now, 3 officers visited the house of Graham Smith to personally apologise, including a chief inspector. That is, apologise not for the arrest, but for the fact that Graham Smith and his fellow demonstrators were unable to join the protest. So there's no apology for the arrest themselves, but there is for preventing the demonstrators from joining the main protest. Certainly in terms of the way the legislation has been interpreted, the Conservative MP David Davis, who voted against this new piece of legislation, has called for the law to be scrutinised by the Home Affairs Select Committee. And Sir Peter Fahey, he's the ex-Greater Manchester Police Chief, has called the legislation poorly defined and far too broad. Sadiq Khan has now also weighed in. He's saying that he's asking for clarity from the Met Police. He's now saying he wants an inquiry as well. He's asking Mark Rowley, he's written to Mark Rowley specifically asking questions such as why the arresting officers did not appear to know that Republic had been liaising with the Met for months before the coronation, why the protest liaison officer was not involved in the decision-making process over the arrests, why there wasn't a faster resolution once the arrests had been made, and what role the new legislation played in the arrests, that it could interfere with peaceful protests if not carefully interpreted. So the Met Police today not giving any interviews. We've got that statement from Mark Rowley, but certainly questions will continue to be asked about the wording of the legislation. Rishi Sunak this morning saying that the wording was sufficient, that they've given the powers to the police. It's up to the police how they interpret them, and questions being asked about how the police are interpreting that legislation.
Yeah, a bit of back and forth. Look, Paul, thank you very much, as ever. Paul Hawkins there, national reporter outside Scotland Yard. I'm going to bring into the fray now Chris Dorr, who's a barrister and author and justice on trial. And Chris, I believe, was on yesterday. Great to have you back on, Chris. Look, I mean, the update here really is what Mark Rowley has said, right? And I'm just wondering where you are at on this. So, in a nutshell, he's saying that we also had intelligence that people intended to vandalise monuments, throw paint at the procession, criminal damage on the route. He's also saying massive concerns about rape alarms for horses, etc., and that would mean that there would be a big issue for public safety and the risk of multiple serious injuries. He does, I think, tellingly also go on to say he basically wishes he could say more, but he can't. Has this swayed you at all? Because you were vehemently against the way the Met behaved, I think, when we spoke yesterday.
Yes, I was, and I still am, and I'm afraid it doesn't assuage my views or change my views in any way. Your reporter was right to identify that we have some of the most ludicrous legislation now in force that we've ever had in relation to public protest. It's actually an offence to lock on, and I'm reading the legislation now. Section 1 of the 2023 Public Order Act says it's an offence to attach yourself to another person, an object or land, I mean, when you have laws that stop you attaching yourself to another person and criminalise that behaviour and give the police the power of arrest, even if they suspect you might be going to attach yourself to another person, where's the right to protest left? What's left if you can't even attach yourself to another person as part of a protest? I mean, it's just ludicrous. But in terms of the police approach to the coronation, it's all very well sending someone around to say days after the coronation to a Republican protest group, we're sorry you couldn't join the protest. Well, when are they going to get another chance to protest the coronation? Never again, not for many, many years. And so it hardly makes up for the fact that this group, which is set up specifically to protest against the monarchy, was prevented from doing so on the very day that a coronation was taking place. An absolute outrage. And all of the stuff about worrying about intelligence, about rape alarms and horses, etc., that's great. I'm sure that some of that is true. And I'm sure that every single public protest, there are concerns or intelligence or phone calls made to the police to suggest that people will be violent or disruptive. The difference is you don't go around arresting random individuals where you have no intelligence that those individuals are going to commit an act of violence or an act of serious disruption.
The police would say, yeah, I get that, but the police would say to that, and indeed they are saying that right in the run-up to this, so forget about the initial interaction they'd had with Republic and all of that stuff, right in the run-up to this, the situation had changed. That is what Mulroney is saying right now, and they were getting significant intelligence about all of this. They would presumably argue, Chris, that some people have put themselves in a position, unfortunately, but maybe because of the fault of others, where they were around people that the police believed were going to cause the potential for serious damage to human life at the coronation, and therefore they acted, whilst it might have been unfortunate towards some individuals, for the greater good. And you don't think most people will be on board with that?
I hope not. I hope we're not on board with the idea that just because you happen to be near to some people, that there's some intelligence of some kind about, that you could be rounded up, arrested and taken to a police station, even if you've done nothing wrong, have no intention of doing anything wrong. What kind of country is that? It's not a free country. That's how they organise demonstrations.
But what do you want them to do
China.
just practically, though? It's very, very difficult, because you've got this crowd of people, it's all kicking off, say, you know that there's some people in there with rape alarms, as indeed they say they were, and tins of pain. They haven't got time to go through every single person, and before you know it, King Charles's carriage has been damaged, or one of the horses has trampled, poor old Dorothy from number 42 to death. I mean, what do you want them to do?
Well, what I want them to do is I want them to act proportionately and properly in response to the behaviour of individuals who there is reliable intelligence they're going to do something wrong, who are acting in a way which is obviously a risk to the public. If I, as Chris Daw, or you, or any of your other viewers are minding their own business, lawfully protesting, holding up a banner saying, "Not my king," or whatever they wanted to do, leave them alone. That's what a free country is all about.
And how do you respond then to the idea that another big part of our society here is, just democracy and the way that the laws are made and they're passed through parliament, etc. And when it comes to things like public order offences as well, they are largely voted on. And so, I mean, are you really saying then that you would like that overturned? I mean, our democratically elected politicians vote on this stuff, don't they?
Well, Parliament passed the Public Order Act, you're quite right, and the regulations were brought in and they were rushed through, as you know, 4 days before the coronation, to give the police these powers to arrest people for doing things which traditionally have been the right of every British person who wishes to protest against government policy. They've been taken away by this government, they've been taken away by this legislation, and absolutely you're right that in a sense that's democratic, if you believe that our democratic process is actually democratic when only 40% of the population vote for the government at any one time, but that's a whole different issue. Of course, Parliament passed this legislation. I'm saying they were wrong to do so, and I hope that the next government will get rid of it, because it's a sad state of affairs when you can't protest in Britain in a perfectly reasonable, proper and lawful way against the hereditary monarchy that millions and millions of people believe should have gone out in the dark.
I've got about 30 seconds, Chris. Do you blame the police more or the government more?
I blame the government more because they brought in the legislation. I feel sorry for the police having to deal with it so quickly, but nevertheless, they shouldn't have done what they did.
Chris, thank you. Chris Daw, barrister and author of Justice on Trial. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Don't go anywhere. More rip-roaring coverage coming your way in the next hour. Plenty more to bring you. I'm going to be talking, of course, about the latest in that ding-dong row, allegedly, between Boris Johnson and the then Prince Charles. Whose side are you on? It was over the Rwanda plan. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith.
Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day.
I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's just about to go 4 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys, and here is what I've got coming our way on GB News this hour. So, Royal Rumble, supposedly Boris Johnson squared up to the then Prince Charles after Prince Charles said that he thought the Rwanda deportation scheme was appalling. Whose side are you on, I'm asking? We've got a Twitter poll on this now, at GB News on Twitter. Is it Boris Johnson or is it the now King Charles? On that note, though, the migrant barge has arrived. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Bibby Stockholm is now in UK waters. It will be heading towards Dorset very, very shortly. But it's only going to house 500 people. Is that enough? What else can be done? And it does come amid a backdrop of net migration figures. So the legal side of this now going to top, supposedly, 675,000 people. Double the pre-Brexit peak. Who'd have thought it, hey? And moving on, so we're also going to be talking as well about this. We've had GP reforms when it comes to phone services at GPs' practices to make your life easier and take the burden off them. Pharmacists are now going to be dishing out prescriptions for a variety of different ailments, again to take the burden off GPs. But all of that money, I just wonder, could it have been spent employing more GPs? Or, dare I say it, do some GPs need to pull their finger out and work harder and work longer? Anyway, moving on, we're also going to be talking, of course, about this. Now, the Met Police, this is incredibly contentious. They've expressed regret not for arresting people at the Coronation, but because those people who they did arrest missed their right to demonstrate at the Coronation. Very much a mixed bag, this. Mark Rowley, the top cop at the Met, has come out and said, look, we wish we could tell you everything that we knew about this. Some people, though, as you just heard from a chap at the end of the last hour, who is a barrister, he's a KC, he was saying they've acted incorrectly and the law is bad. And what will this mean for you, potentially going forward, whenever you want to protest? Look, controversial question this, but even if the Met did maybe act in a bit of a heavy-handed manner, do you actually really care? Because was your main focus on the coronation not being disrupted? Anyway, all of that coming your way and much, much more this hour with me, Patrick Christys. Yeah, loads on the agenda today. Take part in that poll. I want to know whether or not you're Team Boris Johnson or Team King Charles when it comes to the Rwanda plan being, quote, appalling. gbviews@gbnews.uk is that email address. Don't be shy. Email in. Get yourself on the telly. But right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Our top story on GB News today. The Information Commissioner's Office says it won't be taking any action against Lancashire Police over the disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wye in February following a 3-week search. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also says it's identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway, with findings and recommendations due to be published in the autumn. Now, as you've been hearing, the Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the coronation after some criticism for the arrest of 6 protesters ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrests as unfortunate, but stressed he supports the arresting officer's actions. The force confirmed the individuals face no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. The Prime Minister has today also said he supports people's right to protest, but says the new laws were needed to protect against serious disruption. In other news today, pharmacists will be given more powers to give prescription medicines without a GP sign-off in the latest government plans to ease the pressure on doctors. Under the measures, patients will be able to get treatments for 7 common conditions, including a sore throat and ear infections, without seeing a doctor. It's hoped the new guidelines, which will come into place this winter, will free up 15 million appointments at surgeries over the next 2 years. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the measures will also help cut waiting times for those seeking medical help.
80% of the country lives about 20 minutes walk from a pharmacy, and for many people they're an easier place to access than their surgery. That's why we're investing more in them and allowing them to do more. And it's not just more medicines that people will be able to get there. They'll be able to get more blood pressure checks or indeed contraception as well. So we're expanding the range of services that people can get from their pharmacies. That's good. It will ease pressure on the system, mean that people can get access to the healthcare they need quicker, and it backs all our fantastic pharmacies as well with extra funding.
NHS GP Anita Raja told us she's sceptical, though, about the new plans.
You know, and I know that at the moment there are so many, hundreds of pharmacies have already closed down. I mean, you know, by the time this is going to be implemented, we may not have a pharmacy near us. So everybody's under a lot of pressure. So we need to really work towards capacity, retrain, recruit, and, you know, and value your healthcare staff.
Now, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan has been arrested by anti-corruption police in Islamabad, and his supporters are being told to shut down the country. Footage shows paramilitary troops in riot gear surrounding the former cricketer inside what looks like a courtroom. The move has led to protests in Mr. Khan's hometown of Lahore, and members of his political party are calling now for support. Imran Khan was ousted from power in a parliamentary vote in April last year. And the Prime Minister has rejected claims made by the Russian president that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak says President Putin is the only person responsible for the invasion that he's called illegal and unprovoked. It follows comments made by Vladimir Putin during a speech made at the annual Victory Day parade in Russia, where he claimed the so-called real war was being waged and his country was simply defending its sovereignty.
The Western global elites still preach about their exceptionalism. They're pitting people against each other and dividing society, provoking bloody conflicts and coups, sowing hatred, Russophobia, aggressive nationalism, and destroying the traditional family values that make people people. They seem to have forgotten what the Nazis' claim to world supremacy led to, forgotten who defeated this horrible, total evil, who stood up for their homeland and did not spare their lives for the people of Europe.
Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is in Kyiv, in Ukraine, for talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Her arrival comes after Russia fired cruise missile strikes in Ukraine this morning. Smoke trails from explosions have been seen over the capital, Kyiv, with local officials saying their air defence systems shot down most of the missiles. Now, here at home, a marine barge which will be used to house migrants has arrived in UK waters. It's called the Bibby Stockholm. It docked in Falmouth this morning to be refurbished ahead of its use as a housing centre. The three-storey barge will be used for at least 18 months and can hold up to 500 people as they wait for their asylum claims to be processed. It's part of a government scheme to move asylum seekers away from costly hotel accommodation. And lastly, ambulance workers in the South East are on strike again today as their union escalates its industrial action over pay. Unite's members employed at South Central and South East Coast Ambulance Service, NHS trusts, will strike until 10 o'clock tonight. Last month, the members rejected the government's offer of a lump sum cash payment and a 5% pay rise. Members of other health unions accepted the same offer. You're with GB News. More news as it happens now. Back to Patrick.
Right, now it sounds like the ultimate clash between Crown and Parliament, this. So former spin doctor to Boris Johnson says that the then Prime Minister squared up to the then Prince Charles. It's amazing how times change so quickly, isn't it? But it was after the now King Charles criticised the Rwanda refugee plan at the Commonwealth Summit in 2022. But why is this only coming to light now? Well, Number 10's former Director of Communications, Geeta Harry, says that Boris went in quite hard against the then Prince of Wales, and Boris supposedly responded and disputed his long-standing ally's account, though, as inaccurate, with a source saying that he deplores any commentary about conversations with the royals. And as if it couldn't get any feistier, Mr Harry says that the meeting was less than amicable, claiming that the pair clashed over the royals' views on slavery too. Now, this is fascinating. There's another dimension to this. Supposedly, according to this report, Boris Johnson advised Prince Charles, as he was then, that he shouldn't make any kind of apologies for slavery or anything like that, because it would lead to calls for financial reparations. Supposedly, then Prince Charles then went ahead with a speech where he apologised, and now we have a situation, don't we, where there are huge calls for financial reparations. But when it comes to the Rwanda scheme issue, supposedly King Charles said that it was appalling. I want to know whether or not you're Team Boris or Team King Charles. And so far, we've got a Twitter poll on this now, at GB News. 68.7% of you are supposedly Team Boris. So there we go. I want to know why. Get in the inbox as well. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Some people saying that the guy who was going to be our king should not have been meddling and getting involved when it comes to actual government policy proposed by an incredibly democratically elected politician. But a huge barge, which is set to house hundreds of migrants off the south coast of England, so this ties in with the old Rwanda scheme, doesn't it, has now arrived in Falmouth in Cornwall. The Bibby Stockholm is being inspected and refitted before being moved to Portland in Dorset, where it will be used to house around 500 single male asylum seekers. So the plans have attracted criticism from literally all sides of the debate, and it's being reported that Portland Port has now reportedly removed its cruise ship schedule from its website in a bid, they say, to deter far-right protesters. So there we go. Joining me now from Falmouth is our southwest of England reporter, Jeff Moody. And Jeff joins me. You get all the best jobs when it comes to me, Jeff. It always seems to be absolutely hammering it down whenever I throw to you, so I can only apologise for that. But the barge is somewhere near you. Is that right?
It is. It's just down here. Apologies if you're on the radio, but it's just down there in the dock. It arrived at about 8 o'clock this morning in a terrible storm. It's been a really bad storm here for most of the day, so I haven't been able to broadcast until this point. The weather has been really quite atrocious. But yes, it's now arrived. It's causing a bit of a storm, not just here weather-wise, but also in terms of politicians. We're hearing a lot of local councillors here saying it shouldn't be here. Councillors at the other side in Weymouth, where it's heading to, through, also saying it shouldn't be there, but it is going to be making its way up the coast to Weymouth any day now. We're not sure exactly when. They're not telling us exactly when it will move, but it's here now for a bit of a refit. It's going to be inspected, it's going to be refit before it makes its journey. Now, it's a 3-storey barge, and it's got 221 bedrooms. So the aim is to house around 500 migrants inside. Now, it's costing £20,000 a day. That's not just the hire of the barge, but the docking fees as well. £20,000 a day, which is considerably less than the £6 million a day that it's currently costing to house so many migrants in hotels. But of course, that's not a direct comparison because they're only expecting to house around 500 in here, whereas there's something like 51,000 migrants across the country who are waiting to be housed. But there's certainly the government, the Home Office, is saying that this is a start. It's going to be good to get this into a workable condition so that it can head forward into Weymouth in the coming weeks and months. It's supposed to be on site by the summer, and it's going to be here on our shores, they say, for 18 months.
I know it has caused a lot of controversy from pretty much, literally, everyone on every side of the political spectrum. Jeff Moody, thank you very much, our South West of England reporter, who is doing his very best in what is looking like it's going to be an amber weather warning at some point there. I'll leave Jeff there, put him out of his misery, let him go back and warm up in the car. But what we've spoken about at the top of the hour so far is this reported row between Boris Johnson and the then Prince Charles over whether or not the Rwanda scheme was indeed appalling. Of course, the bigger question, some would argue, is whether or not a member of the royal family, soon to be monarch, should be getting involved and passing comment on government policy. But the Bibby Stockholm, that boat there, we're going to end up with more like it. And if you think about it, it's because we have to. I mean, there's already plans for more like it, and no matter which area you're in, there was calls for some to be put around the Wirral, for example, and the Wirral have Labour politicians around there. They were against it because they were saying human rights issues. Now, personally, I do strongly suspect that it's just because they didn't want a barge full of illegal migrants in their area, but they are saying that it's human rights issues, OK? They don't want them there. Then you end up with areas like in Dorset, for example, in Poole, where they have Conservative politicians and Conservative council, and they are saying, well, we don't want it because, well, it's quite straightforwardly, we don't really want a boatload of young single men there because of security issues, potentially, and also issues for businesses. So you're getting problems here on both sides of the spectrum. But when you look at the numbers, 500 people, OK? 500 people are going to be on that boat for, well, anything up to 18 months. If we sort our processing out, it might just be a few months, but then that relies on us being able to deport people to Rwanda, doesn't it? We are going to need more boats, aren't we? We are going to need to stock the channel full of barges, clearly. If the rate of people arriving here and the fact that you can only fit 500 people on, I mean, that barge and the intake of that would do for maybe one day. 1 day's worth of people. I mean, we might as well just basically say, look, the game's up and stack a row of barges across the channel and let people walk across, haven't we? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Get those views coming in. But we will be seeing more barges housing people if these predictions are anything to go by as well, because immigration experts are saying that net migration could hit a record of 675,000. And I've got a theory that barges like the Bibby Stockholm, they're going to be turned into designer accommodation in the years to come. People are going to be paying £1 million for a cabin as if they were in central London or something, because look at these numbers of people just arriving, even legally. That 675,000 figure is double the pre-Brexit peak of 331,000 8 years ago. Now, there are some reasons behind this rise, or at least some of the reasons we're being told for it. It's suggested that foreign students, humanitarian visas, and these might explain this record high. I am a little bit sceptical about that, purely because a lot of the humanitarian effort that was made with Ukraine and was made with Afghanistan and with Hong Kong was already in the pipeline. So I remain sceptical about the idea that that's all behind it. I am significantly more open to the idea that was put forward earlier on in this show at the top of the 3 o'clock hour by a chap from Migration Watch UK, that we're seeing a lot of people now bringing over their dependents. So we had a wave of people who came over here who maybe were granted asylum or came as students or just came legally, who are now bringing dependents over, and those tend to come in 2s and 3s. So maybe this is why we are seeing a massive influx. I am also keen to hear from you about this in the Brexit angle there, because that is a telling figure, isn't it? And it stands out that it is double the pre-Brexit peak of 331,000. If you did vote for Brexit, I dare say this wasn't what you voted for. There is also an argument as well, isn't there, to say that the demographic breakdown of this figure of the net migration is yet to be revealed to us. But there is also an argument to say, isn't there, that maybe now, since leaving the European Union, we'll see people of a vastly different demography than we would of continental Europe, because we'll have more people coming from various parts of the Middle East and the subcontinent, etc., or even parts of Africa. But there we go. Joining me now is Kevin Saunders, who's former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. And Kevin, as you can tell, I'm doing a bit of an immigration roundup here. We are on the legal stuff now. Talk to me a bit, if that's all right with you, about dependents and whether or not, if you come here legally, it is easy to game the system in a way to bring over people who are relatives and therefore add to these net migration numbers. Is that easily done?
There is a procedure that you have to go through. It is possible. It's not really easy. It's not as easy as just turning up on a boat. But yes, you can do it.
And how do they go through that process? Would you mind telling me? So if I'm a student who's come from India, say, and I've enrolled on a course at King's College London or somewhere, and I've done that course for 3 years, and I want to bring my wife and mother or father or brothers over, how can I do that?
Right. Well, it depends what your student visa actually says. If you've been granted a 3-year visa to do a course, as you've suggested, in London, at the end of those 3 years, you should be going home. So you can't be then bringing great granny and 5 uncles and 3 cousins into the UK. You'll be going home. So you've got to actually look at the visa application that was made originally. Now, what the government has done, the government has decided that they need more people from India to work in the economy. So they've granted more visas to Indians to come to the UK, and they will want to bring their families.
OK, and so what do you attribute to this steep rise? Because the spin on it is that it's down to humanitarian crises. So that would be Afghanistan, maybe Syria, Ukraine, and you could argue Hong Kong as well. And I just seem to remember talking about last year's figures and this being the same excuse then. I just wondered, we haven't got every single person from Ukraine or Hong Kong or Afghanistan over here, have we? So, can the same excuse still be used?
No. We've got about 500,000 from Hong Kong, and that's a significant number. We've got, as we see every day in the press, we've got a huge number from Ukraine as well. So they are, I would suggest, spiking the figures a little bit. And, of course, as I've just said, we did a deal, Rishi Sunak did a deal with the Indians to allow a large number of visas to be issued to Indians to come to the UK. So I would suggest that these figures have spiked a little bit. But you're going to continue to see illegal immigration coming through in record numbers.
Yeah, this is the other look. Kevin, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. That's Kevin Saunders there, who's the former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. And I think that kind of encapsulates perfectly those two stories coming together at once, really. The Bibby Stockholm, that barge for people who've come here illegally across the Channel, only going to house 500 people. That's going to pull up in Poole at some point in the next few weeks, having had a full refurb. And that's supposed to be some visible sign, isn't it, that we are now doing something to stop the boats. Well, the jury's very much out on that. Again, the Rwanda scheme doesn't appear to be happening, but then you look at the legal side of it, and just to move it on again, I think, what about our infrastructure? Do you feel, when you look around the area that you're in right now, I've just reported with Liam Halligan on 700,000 people missing vital mortgage and rental repayments. Why? Well, because the cost of everything is going up. Why? Because there isn't enough housing stock, and we can't really build as quickly, can we, as the amount of people coming here. So what can we do about that? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, since COVID, there has been a huge shift in culture towards quitting the commute and working from home. But this story stood out to me earlier on today. Apparently, about 40% of people who are working from home say that they'd actually rather go back into the office. So the gloss of working from home and not having to put pants on is slipping, isn't it? Saying that their workload has increased and it's actually having a negative impact on their health. Loneliness was also up there as one of the biggest issues, seemingly now trumping the convenience of staying at home. So I just went out and about a little bit earlier on and asked people whether or not they liked working from home. Were they more productive and would they rather go back to the office?
I think working from home poses a lot of positives, but also negatives. I think it's personal preference. I don't work from home. I'm a hairdresser, but my husband does. And it works well for his career, but it doesn't for mine.
No, I think I need those days to get away from like office workers, you know, because you get a lot of people who like ask you questions on, so you need like the day where you can kind of turn off the I am and just work. So I work 3 days in office and then 2 at home. So I think it helps me with productivity overall. Like, I don't know that I'm necessarily more productive, as productive. But yeah, I definitely don't think I could do fully work from home.
And I personally like working from home. You know, I've got a young family, so it's really easy to, you know, look after the kids, you know.
If your boss or your next job, whatever, said to you, look, you've got to work in the office every day, would that be a no-no for you?
Yes, it would, yeah. I wouldn't consider that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to have a good, you know, flexible work-life balance, and I think things have moved on, you know, in the last couple of years. You know, I think the genie's out the bottle, and you can't really put it back in now. You know, it's So it would be a deal breaker for me. Yeah.
So you don't need like the time in the morning and in the evening to, you know, travel to the office, and I don't know. I think you just have like more time in the end.
I realised very, very quickly when I was asking people, if you're being honest with me, are you more or less productive when you're working from home, that they're all going to give me the same answer because their boss might be watching and they'd see them, wouldn't they, fess up to the fact that they don't put pants on and they start drinking wine first thing in the morning. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, the Information Commissioner's Office has announced that it will be taking no action against Lancashire Police for revealing personal details about the mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, who was sadly found dead in February. I'm going to speak to a former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Blexley, about this, and it was about one of the largest and most documented missing persons inquiries that I can ever remember in this country. That was the Nicola Bulley case, where the police, it appears, have got off scot-free. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, so, look, we all remember the Nicola Bulley case. It was, for my money, probably the largest missing persons investigation for a very long period of time, certainly one that absolutely snowballed in terms of public attention. There was wall-to-wall coverage of this tragedy, wasn't there? But the Information Commissioner's Office has now announced that it will be taking no action against Lancashire Police for revealing those personal details of mother of 2 Nicola Bulley, who was sadly found dead back in February. So, at the time, the force was widely criticised for making Ms Bulley's struggles with alcohol and the menopause public. But the ICO has said that it would not punish Lancashire Police for disclosing information during what it called a fast-paced investigation. They also added that it would provide further details around its decision following the inquest into Nicola Bulley's death. To discuss this further, I am joined in the studio by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Peter, thank you very much. What have we learnt here, really? Because at the time, there was a huge amount of criticism about the police for, well, essentially releasing what you could argue is medical information, really.
Yeah, well, to sort of paraphrase these 2 inquiries that have announced their findings this afternoon, it's essentially nothing to see here, kindly move on. But we did learn that the police contact with Nicola Bulley before she went missing was when an officer responded to an ambulance being called to her house. We discovered that this afternoon. That has been investigated by the Independent Office of Police Conduct, and they found that there is no misdemeanour there, for want of a better expression. Although, together with the Information Commissioner's Office, saying that, again, with regards to that information being released, they find no adverse kind of comment on that. It is really interesting that we don't have lessons have been learned, that tired old phrase that kind of makes my heart sink wherever I hear it. We now have new phrasings, procedural learning and areas of learning. So possibly somebody's got promoted for coming up with this new terminology.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, your mind boggles, doesn't it, when it comes to that kind of stuff. But the police overall absolutely copped it at the time for what was seen, because of the length of time it took to find Nicola, as some kind of bungled operation. We had that chap who was a part of a dive team as well, who was, for want of a better phrase, sticking his oar in left, right and centre, wasn't he? And then people saying that maybe now the police have got something to answer for here. But the reality is, Peter, that we are going to have to wait for this inquest to get all of the answers, aren't we?
Absolutely. The coroner's inquest will be absolutely crucial, and that is when we will hear every single piece of information about the search for Nicola in its entirety. And let's not forget, it wasn't the police that found Nicola's body. Tragically, that was discovered by members of the public. And there is yet another inquiry, which is the College of Policing, who are doing their own independent inquiry into it as well. So it'll be very interesting to see if they discover that there are more areas of learning, for example.
Yeah, and I think for some people who are maybe saying, well, why are you all raking this up now? Well, this news has just dropped today, so there is that. But also, at the time, Peter, there were so many conspiracy theorists doing the rounds, weren't there? You couldn't move for it online. A lot of it was, well, all of it really was bang out of order, and it was incredibly mawkish and horrible, really. So, actually, I think it is probably in the public's interest to know, whilst maintaining absolute respect to the family, as much information as possible, which maybe shuts a few people up.
Undoubtedly, but the uncomfortable truth is this gossip and rumour-mongering still continues apace. I am contacted every week by people forwarding stuff to me from different groups on Facebook, for example, where the conversations are running rampant. And I'm afraid that today is probably not going to quell much of that. It will continue. What we really need to hear is all the evidence from the inquest, and hopefully we get definitive answers to all the questions that so many people are asking.
Now, if it's all right, I'm just going to move it on a little bit from Nicola Bulley, because whilst I've got you, Peter, I've been doing a lot of conversations with a lot of kind of quite high-minded legal boffins, as they would probably describe themselves, about the way that the police responded to a couple of events at the Coronation, right? And they were saying to me, oh, this is shocking. The law is bad and the way the police enforced it was bad, and they just went in there and rounded anyone up and they just locked them up for 16 hours without charge just to get them away from protesting, and it's an affront to democracy. Mark Rowley has come out today and said, we had lots of intelligence that the situation had changed in the hours running up to the coronation. We did arrest people who were in possession of things like paint, loud hailers, rape alarms, and there's much more information that we wish we could make public that we're not going to. Whose side are you on when it comes to this stuff? The police?
Well, as a lowly former cop, as opposed to one of your high-minded legal people, let me just say, I think the Met Police, unfortunately, showed real double standards over this. Because if we set aside the people from Republic that were arrested, for example, that's had so much airtime and column inches today, and look at some of the other arrests. People were arrested for conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. Now, that is an offence under the Police Crime Courts and Sentencing Act, which came into being last year. People were also arrested on suspicion of committing a breach of the peace, law that has been in existence for a very, very, very long time. Now, people that were inconvenienced by the environmental protests, who couldn't get to work, who couldn't get to hospital appointments, who couldn't drop the kids off at school, are saying, well, there was one set of policing kind of rules for the coronation, perhaps understandably, and yet when they were trying to go about their business, the police were supplying protesters with bottles of water, standing on the curbside and largely doing nothing. So in that regard, it appears that when there is a coronation, the police will impose the law. When Joe Public and Joanna Public are trying to go about their business, the police will interpret the law. And there's two very clear, distinct differences in that. And I think the next time that the environmentalists take to the streets, block the traffic, it will be very interesting to see.
Well, it's happening today. And this is one thing that we're going to keep an eye on. It's almost like we planned this, Peter, so I promise you that we didn't. But we are going to be having a look a little bit later on. So apparently some slow walkers from Just Stop Oil are out and about. So it will be fascinating to see how the police handle that. Look, Peter, thank you very much, as ever. There's Peter Blexley there, who's a former Scotland Yard detective. Thank you for joining me in the studio. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Don't go anywhere. Plenty more to bring you. And don't forget to get involved in our Twitter poll. Are you Team Boris or Team Charles over their alleged Rwanda row? Supposedly Boris Johnson squared up to the then Prince Charles. Right now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour on GB News. The Information Commissioner's Office says it won't be taking any action against Lancashire Police over its disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wyre in February following a 3-week search. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also says it's identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway, with findings and recommendations due to be published in the autumn. The Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the coronation after it was criticised by arresting 6 Republican protesters ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrests as unfortunate, but stressed he supported the arresting officers' actions. The force confirmed the individuals faced no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. The Prime Minister has today said he supports people's right to protest, but says the new laws are needed to protect against serious disruption. And the former Prime Minister of Pakistan has been arrested by anti-corruption police in Islamabad, and his supporters have been told to shut down the country. Footage shows paramilitary troops in riot gear surrounding the former cricketer inside a courtroom. The move has led to protests in Mr Khan's hometown of Lahore, and members of his political party are calling now for support. Imran Khan was ousted from power in a parliamentary vote in April last year. And the Prime Minister has rejected claims by the Russian president today that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak says President Putin is the only person responsible for the invasion that he's called illegal and unprovoked. It follows comments made by Vladimir Putin today during a speech at Russia's annual Victory Day parade, where he claimed a so-called real war is being waged and that his country is defending its sovereignty. Those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, the deadline is looming for low-income pensioners to claim available credit, with just 10 days left on the clock. So the cost of living payment, worth £301, is available over 1 million UK households, but only around 850,000 people actually have claimed it. So is the system too complicated? And could you be missing out on your payment? If you've got elderly relatives as well, you should probably listen very closely now, because Liam Halligan is with me and he's going to help make all of this a bit clearer, as he always does. It's our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. I've got a feeling you might be about to save a few people a few quid.
This is, Patrick, a bit of news you can use. I often come on here talking about the car market, and I was talking about mortgages earlier and wanging on about something else. This is news you can use. What I'm doing here, I'm about to say some stuff that the government wants you to hear, not in a propaganda way, because the minister wants more people to claim benefits for which they are eligible. And what I'm talking about here is pension credit. We'll put a little graphic up and radio listeners can follow along as well. This pension credit is worth about £3,500 per year on average, and it is what the civil service call a gateway benefit. That means if you get pension credit, that is then a gateway to other benefits, because it means you are then taken in under another scheme, because if the means test on your income for pension credit, topping up the basic state pension, suggests you're eligible, then you will be eligible for other things. And one thing that you will be eligible for is one of these 3 times a year cost of living payments, which is £301. This is about just over £900 a year, which the government is giving to people on lower incomes during this cost of living squeeze, partly to help with energy bills, partly to help with the cost of living in general. There are other additional cost of living benefits for people with disabilities and people who are particularly vulnerable. So if you're on pension credit, you then get the cost of living payment as well. But there is a deadline of next Friday, May the 19th, for applying for this pension credit. And this is what the Pensions Minister, Laura Trott, actually said. And this isn't a party political broadcast. This is about what the government wants people to know. I took the view this was non-partisan. I'm sure a Labour Welfare Minister, Pensions Minister would say the same thing. And Laura Trott, the Pensions Minister, said, pension credit can make a real difference, and I'm determined to make sure this support, worth an average of £3,500 a year, is reaching everyone who needs it, particularly as we know how much pressure households across the country have been under. So how do you work out if you're eligible for pension credit, you or an elderly loved one? Well, I think we've got it on a strap. We can put it on a strap on the screen, but for radio listeners as well, you need to call the Pension Credit Helpline, which is 0800 99 1234. That's Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So there's no particular clever analysis from me on this. I'm just here as a sort of public service announcement. I heard the Pensions Minister on the radio this morning, and I thought we should bring this to our viewers. There will be lots of older people watching GB News, listening on the radio. We know we've got a lot of older people in our demographic. So I'm here to say you don't be scared of this. Ring the number between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. I'll say it again for radio listeners, 0800 99 1234. See if you're eligible for pension credit, because if you are eligible for pension credit, then you'll also get that gateway to the top-up living standards payment of £301. But you've got to do it by next Friday.
You've got to do it by next Friday. That is vitally important. I just wonder, Liam, whether or not some people, dare I say it, especially of an older demographic, have a bit of a pride issue sometimes when it comes to claiming benefits?
Absolutely. The household I grew up in was a working-class Irish household, and no one I knew in my family or in the people who work in construction, that's what my family did, they just didn't claim benefits. There are certain types of people who just don't want to claim benefits. There are some other kinds of people, you may say, Patrick, who are too keen to claim benefits and maybe claim benefits that they're not eligible for. But I think you've put your finger on something there. There is a certain group of people, it's not a particular ethnicity or even a particular gender or a particular part of the country. There are just some people who don't want to claim benefits. What I would say, if you're a pensioner, right, everyone gets the basic state pension, right? This is not means tested. If you get the basic state, you get the basic state pension from your national insurance contributions that you'll have made all your life. You are entitled to the basic state pension. That's why it's a universal benefit. And if you are eligible for pension credit, that also means you're entitled to pension credit.
Yeah.
I'm generally a small state guy. Yeah. You're generally a small state guy. We both think the tax burden, 70-year high, is far too high. But I would say if you're eligible for those benefits, you make that phone call and you make sure you get what you're entitled to.
Good stuff. Cracking advice. Liam, thank you very, very much. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor with On the Money. Right, OK, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Plenty more to bring you in just a moment as Liam makes his way out of the studio. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. We're Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So, the Prime Minister has been defending his new plan to free up 7 million GP appointments a year by allowing people to seek treatment for common conditions at pharmacies. It's worth noting as well that our current NHS waiting list time is around the 7 million mark, so this clearly they'll be hoping will have a knock-on effect on that, in a good way. The initiative, costing 645 million quid, would expand pharmacy services to also allow them to prescribe more medications and perform blood checks. And it comes after yesterday's announcement, didn't it, that they're going to have around 240 million quid spent essentially including a new phone system in every single GP's surgery. For the near £1 billion, though, that this is costing us, there is, I suspect, quite a strong case to say maybe we could use that to pay a lot more GPs. Joining me now is Gareth Jones, Director of Corporate Affairs at the National Pharmacy Association. And this is going to be a fascinating insight, Gareth. Thank you very much for joining me on this. So,
Pleasure.
Are pharmacists happy about this?
Well, pharmacy is a very it's a trusted and accessible local service. So pharmacists are keen to do more for their local communities, for the patients they serve. So they do welcome this opportunity to be able to deal with more problems. So when a member of the public comes in, sometimes pharmacists would have had to say, I need to send you to your GP to deal with this, whilst they actually have the expertise and they have the medicines in the pharmacy. So for these 7 conditions, in future, when this is implemented later in the year, they'll have that ability to actually help people immediately. And for some conditions like urinary tract infections, people need to get treated as soon as possible. And I think this is going to be a better way to get treatment for those conditions.
Is there a little bit of a concern there that somebody might ring up and get put on this automated system, they get a call back, they end up talking to a doctor's receptionist about something very, very personal, like a urinary tract infection. They get told, well, you can go to your pharmacy, or impetigo is one of these things. I mean, so you're going to have to say, I've got some pretty debilitating skin condition. And then they go, OK, go to your local pharmacy. So you're in your boots where there's Marjorie buying a shampoo and somebody else buying a nail file, and you're in there talking to a pharmacist who no doubt is very nice and lovely, but about this horrible rash you've got somewhere very personal in essentially a shop. Do you concern this might put people off getting healthcare?
So I think you have to recognise that more than actually have a consultation room now. So there is an opportunity to have a confidential discussion where you can't be overheard. I think that's really important. And of course, people don't have to do this. If people still want to see the GP, they're not being forced to use a pharmacy. This is an additional option, which hopefully the public will feel is useful, they actually want to do. And the key benefit to the NHS is that it's taking some pressure off GPs. And clearly, you mentioned the waiting lists at the moment and the great pressure that's on general practice. This is a measure that's intended to support general practice, make it easier for patients to get access to treatment and make the NHS more efficient.
This is all centred around clearing a backlog of appointments for GPs, in turn clearing a backlog of appointments for our National Health Service as a whole, and crucially, making people healthier or certainly less ill anyway. And I am very keen to know whether or not the Director of Corporate Affairs at the National Pharmacy Association thinks that this is going to work.
So I think this will work to take on these additional roles for some time. Community pharmacy's been hugely underfunded for many years, 30% cut in funding. So, that's been a real challenge for us, and pharmacies have really struggled recently. We've been asking for additional funding, but this does come with some additional funding. So, it gives pharmacy the resources that they require to be able to do it properly, and that's really important. So, we believe this could be the start of new opportunity for community pharmacy to deliver more services. And it's not just about common ailments. Actually, there's an expansion of blood pressure tests in community pharmacy, and also oral contraception. So the expectation is that a significant proportion of women on oral contraception will be able to get their treatment managed through a community pharmacy, so I won't have to deal with the GP. Again, frees up time for the GP, and it's more convenient for the public.
Yeah, and just very quickly, sorry, because I'm a bit pressed for time here, Gareth. I had a couple of emails in from people wondering about whether or not they'd end up having to pay to get their blood pressure done or for any of these things, but they wouldn't, would they?
No, so the system will be exactly the same as it is now. So if you're exempt, you remain exempt.
Great stuff. Gareth, thank you very much, and I hope to talk to you again very soon because, hey, we're going to see how this works eventually, aren't we? So Gareth Jones, the Director of Corporate Affairs at the National Pharmacy Association. Great to have him on. What did you make of that? But we've got another story to round off the hour. So back to that shocking video of a now sacked Starbucks employee accusing a customer of transphobia and assaulting another. Let's have a look at the clip.
Absolutely not. Don't ever call me transphobic. Ever. You do not know me.
You're being transphobic.
Karen, now get out. Do not call me transphobic.
You are transphobic. Now get out.
I want a refund.
You're not having one. Doing good things. Hi, get out.
Absolutely.
You are trespassing now.
They've got cameras.
You are trespassing.
We've
Get
got
out.
cameras.
Get out. You are trespassing.
Apparently, we said something transphobic.
You actually, you
Oh, should have waited for a latte. Now, with me now is Caroline Fisk, who's the founder of Conservatives for Women. Caroline, great to have you on. Look, we don't know what that woman said to that particular individual. I suppose, Caroline, it is worth saying there is a chance that she might have been transphobic.
Well, I mean, I don't think we can even speculate. And secondly, there's been a real atmosphere coming from the College of Policing, individual police forces, even the Crown Prosecution Service, that something is transphobic if anyone perceives it as being transphobic. So the bar is set so low, people have been encouraged to see almost anything they'd like to think of as transphobic.
I think that this is symptomatic of a wider issue. I think that's what you're alluding to there, which is that it's not just whatever is perceived as being transphobic, it's also then the idea that you are justified in reacting incredibly strongly to that, shouting and screaming at a customer, potentially assaulting another individual or with a camera, and it's that kind of behaviour that appears to be on the rise?
Absolutely. So people have been encouraged to report anything they perceive as being transphobic. They're sort of invited in to report it to police forces, encouraged, you'll be treated with great care, caution. So it's a really terrible narrative that vulnerable people, I would classify that violent man, I would say a vulnerable person, he has been encouraged to, if you see something as transphobic, if there's something that concerns you, almost encouraged and enabled to act in that very violent way. Yes.
Caroline, there is an important point here, which is that, and the individual in that clip, neither individual really has been identified in it, but what I think is important to consider here for people is that if people who were born men who now identify as being women behave aggressively towards women, that is, many would regard, men now assaulting women on a more regular basis. And that, I think, should terrify people. If that person didn't have their hair down or makeup on or whatever, many people would have just viewed that clip as a man verbally assaulting a woman, wouldn't they?
Well, for me at this point, there's nothing to say that person. So he was accusing a woman of transphobia. I mean, I don't know at this point whether that man was trans-identifying, but I mean, absolutely. So therefore, any of us looking at it, all that clip was somebody, a man being very violent towards a woman and then obviously violent towards another man. I mean, I don't want to put any gloss around it. That was male violence, but I think the really important message is it's somehow been kind of affirmed or legitimized by police forces, the Crown Prosecution Service. But I would also add, I don't think it's a coincidence that the incident took place in Starbucks. Back in 2020, Starbucks was very involved in a whole kind of gender ideology affirmation advertising campaign.
Caroline, we currently live in a society, I think, don't we, where we need to start asking ourselves questions. If an individual did not call themselves trans and maybe put a wig on and do whatever, is it a man in a woman's changing room? Is it a man who has raped a woman who wants to go to a woman's prison? Is that a man who wants to go into a woman's prison? Is that, in that video that we've seen there, as, again, it's not immediately identifiable from the clip, strong suspicions that is a man getting right in a woman's face and doing all of this stuff and screaming at her. And we need to look at this differently as a society, don't we?
Yes, I think that we should stop using the term trans woman. It really confuses the whole dialogue. I think if we see a man being violent, we should call them a man. Yeah. If we see a man who wants to identify as a woman, we should call that person a man. It just makes the whole conversation much clearer. And, again, only 10 years ago, we just very happily used the terms transsexuals, and we need to go back there. And it was much clearer. Everyone knew where they stood. Men are men, women are women, and we need to call out, violence from whoever it comes from. The press need to start calling a man, a woman, a woman.
Caroline, thank you very much. Caroline Fist there, founder of Conservatives for Women, reacting to that shocking clips from a Starbucks, I believe anyway, in Southampton. Now, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. I've got a lot of excitement to bring you in the next hour. The migrant barge arrives in Cornwall ahead of its transfer to Dorset. I will be hosting a debate as well on whether or not we should bring back fox hunting. Some vets, believe it or not, have come out and said that maybe fox hunting is all right. And Starmer says that woke issues don't matter. Is he right? Do you care more about the NHS and the education system and the trains running on time than you do about woke issues, maybe like the one we've just spoken about, for example? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening, everybody. It's just gone 5 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys, and you are watching and listening to GB News. And here is what I've got coming up in the final hour. Yes, so did Boris Johnson square up to our now king over the Rwanda deal? And if he did, whose side are you on? Supposedly, the then Prince Charles said, Boris, this Rwanda plan is appalling. And Boris said, back off. Whose side are you on? On a related note, we're also talking about this barge. The migrant barge is now officially in UK waters, getting a refit before it then goes to pool in Dorset. What do you make of this? It's only going to house 500 people. I mean, I think we're probably going to have to stack a load of barges across the channel so people can just walk straight over from Calais if the current rate of immigration is anything to go by. Moving on, we're also going to be talking about this very pertinent issue. Should we bring back fox hunting? Now, for those of you who thought the fox hunting debate was dead in the water, no, absolutely not. A series of vets, yes, people who are tasked with looking after animals, have come out and said that fox populations are dangerously low, and they blame the abolition of fox hunting. I'll find out why a little bit later on. And one to round us off as well. Nobody cares about woke, says Keir Starmer. Look, is he right? OK? Do people actually, when push comes to shove, care more about the NHS, the education system, the transport system and everything else, as opposed to the culture wars? Is he right? GB Views at GBNews.uk. It's going to be a big hour there. Stay tuned. I have actually got a little poll running right now on GB News' Twitter, at GB News. Are you Team Boris or Team King Charles? That's what I want to know. Supposedly, there was a right royal rumble there when King Charles opposed the Rwanda migrant plan. Look, get in touch as well. gbviews at gbnews.uk is that email address. A whole host of great topics there. But right now, it's Polly with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight. The Information Commissioner's Office says it won't be taking any action against Lancashire Police over the disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wye in February following a 3-week search. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also says it's identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway. Its findings and recommendations are due to be published in the autumn. And the Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the Coronation after some criticism for the arrest of 6 protesters ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrest as unfortunate, but stressed he supports the arresting officer's actions. The force confirmed the individuals face no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. The Prime Minister has today said he supports people's right to protest, but says the new laws are needed to protect against serious disruption. Pharmacists will be able to give prescription medicines without a GP sign-off in the latest government plans to ease the pressure on doctors. Under the measures, patients will be able to get treatments for 7 common conditions, including a sore throat and ear infections, without seeing a doctor. It's hoped the new guidelines, which will come into place this winter, will free up 15 million appointments at surgeries over the next 2 years. Rishi Sunak says the measures will also help cut waiting times for those seeking medical help.
80% of the country lives about 20 minutes walk from a pharmacy, and for many people they're an easier place to access than their surgery. That's why we're investing more in them and allowing them to do more. And it's not just more medicines that people will be able to get there. They'll be able to get more blood pressure checks or indeed contraception as well. So we're expanding the range of services that people can get from their pharmacies. That's good. It will ease pressure on the system, mean that people can get access to the healthcare they need quicker, and it backs all our fantastic pharmacies as well with extra funding.
Well, NHS GP Anita Raja told GB News she's sceptical about the new plans.
You know, and I know that at the moment there are so many, hundreds of pharmacies have already closed down. I mean, you know, by the time this is going to be implemented, we may not have a pharmacy near us. So everybody's under a lot of pressure. So we need to really work towards capacity, retrain, recruit, and, you know, and value your healthcare staff.
Now, in international news, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan has been arrested by anti-corruption police in Islamabad, and his supporters are being told to shut down the country. Footage shows paramilitary troops in riot gear surrounding the former cricketer inside what looks like a courtroom. The move has led to protest in Mr. Khan's hometown of Lahore, and members of his political party are calling for support. Imran Khan was ousted from power in a parliamentary vote in April last year. And the Prime Minister's rejected claims made by the Russian president that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak says President Putin is the only person responsible for the invasion that led to what he's called an illegal and unprovoked conflict. It follows comments by Vladimir Putin made during a speech at the annual victory parade in Russia, where he claimed a so-called real war is being waged and that his country is defending its sovereignty.
The Western global elites still preach about their exceptionalism. They're pitting people against each other and dividing society, provoking bloody conflicts and coups, sowing hatred, Russophobia, aggressive nationalism, and destroying the traditional family values that make people people. They seem to have forgotten what the Nazis' claim to world supremacy led to, forgotten who defeated this horrible, total evil, who stood up for their homeland and did not spare their lives for the people of Europe.
Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is in Kyiv for talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Her arrival comes after Russia fired cruise missile strikes in Ukraine this morning. Smoke trails from explosions have been seen in the capital, Kyiv, with local officials saying their air defence systems shot most of the missiles down. Now, here at home, a marine barge which will be used to house migrants has arrived in UK waters. It's called the Bibby Stockholm. It docked in Falmouth this morning. It's going to be refurbished ahead of its use as a housing centre. The 3-storey barge will be used for at least 18 months and can hold up to 500 people as they wait for their asylum claims to be processed. It's part of a government scheme to move asylum seekers away from costly hotel accommodation. And ambulance workers in the South East are striking today as their union escalates its industrial action over pay. Unite's members employed at South Central and South East Coast ambulance services will strike until 10 o'clock tonight. Last month, members rejected the government's offer of a lump sum cash payment and a 5% pay rise. Members of other health unions did accept that offer. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Time now for a big royal rumble. So a former spin doctor to Boris Johnson says the then PM squared up to King Charles after he criticised the Rwanda refugee plan at the Commonwealth Summit in 2022. But this is only coming to light now because Number 10's former Director of Communications, Guto Harry, says that Boris went in quite hard against the then Prince of Wales. Boris responded and disputed his long-standing ally's account. He said, oh, look, it's inaccurate, this isn't true, with a source saying he deplores any commentary on conversations with the royals. But if it couldn't get any feistier, Mr Harry says that the meeting was less than amicable, claiming that the pair also clashed over the royals' views on slavery too. So in a nutshell, supposedly Boris Johnson was very angry. He was the then Prime Minister, now King Charles was then Prince Charles, about Charles saying that the Rwanda scheme was supposedly appalling. That appeared on the front of several newspapers, and it wasn't really massively denied by the palace in a way that insinuates that maybe he did think that the Rwanda scheme was appalling. Was that an unelected head of state getting involved in politics in a way that he's not supposed to have done? But also this slavery issue is fascinating because supposedly Boris Johnson advised the then Prince Charles to not apologise for historic links to the slave trade. Prince Charles then did, and Boris said to him, if you do that, then you're going to end up having calls for financial reparations. What's happening now? Financial reparations. So there we go. I've got a poll on this at the moment. So far, 70% of you, 70% of you, are Team Boris over Team King Charles. It's controversial. Make sure you take part in it, and GB News on Twitter. Also, you can email in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But in light of this, relevance to Rwanda here, a huge barge is set to house hundreds of migrants off the south coast of England. It's now arrived at Falmouth in Cornwall. The Bibby Stockholm is being inspected and refitted before being moved to Portland in Dorset, where it will be used to house 500 single male asylum seekers. Does anyone else think that we might need a bigger barge or more of them? But the plans have attracted criticism from all sides of the debate, and it's been reported that Portland Port has reportedly, which is quite difficult to say, removed its cruise ship schedule from its website in a bid to deter, as they say anyway, far-right protesters. Joining me now from what was a incredibly wet and windy Falmouth is our southwest of England reporter, Jeff Moody, who I'm hoping hasn't been swept out. It's all right there now, Jeff. Fantastic, OK. And that is the barge behind you. What's going on?
It is indeed. Well, it swept into town at 8 o'clock this morning amidst a terrible storm, not just weather-wise, but also politically. A lot of the councillors down here in Falmouth saying they really didn't want it associated with their town. But here it is. It's in the dock. People have been going in and out all day. We've just seen some heavy crates being lifted by crane onto the barge. It's a 3-storey barge. It's got 221 bedrooms on board, and it's set to house at least 500 migrants. The cost is around £20,000 a day. That's the hire of the barge, plus the docking fees as well, which the Home Office is saying is considerably less, of course, than the £6 million a day that it's currently spending on housing migrants in hotels. But there are 51,000 migrants in Britain awaiting processing, and this can only deal with 500. So as you say, we're going to need an awful lot more barges to cope with all of the influx of asylum seekers in this country. We're not sure at the moment how long it'll be staying here in Falmouth before it begins that final journey east down to Weymouth, to Portland, just outside Weymouth. But we're thinking it's going to be here for a couple of weeks while it's refurbished, while it's maintained, and then it's making its final journey to Weymouth, where it's expected to stay throughout the summer, in fact around 18 months, they say. So I guess it's a case of seeing how this goes, seeing if this is a successful project, and if it is, they can look at rolling out more barges from more places to try and deal with the problem.
But it has not been without controversy, Jeff, from literally all sides of the political spectrum for a variety of different reasons. And it's not really going to be getting a particularly warm reception when it rocks up in Poole, is it?
No, it's not, and it's not had a particularly warm reception here either. Speaking to people on the street, a lot of people here saying they don't really want anything to do with it, they wish it wasn't in their port, and the same thing is happening in Dorset. A lot of Dorset councillors are saying that they really feel uncomfortable, they really feel ill at ease with the whole concept of housing refugees in what has been described as a prison vessel. Well, I've seen pictures of inside the barge, and it certainly doesn't look like a prison. The facilities do look very good. There are cafes and bars inside, and the accommodation does look particularly respectful. It doesn't look very nice from the outside, though. It is certainly a bit of a carbuncle, but it doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. It's whether it does the job or not, isn't it?
Jeff, look, thank you very, very much. There's Jeff Moody there, who's done an incredible job reporting to us from Falmouth there in what was previously kind of amber weather warning conditions, but it appears to have brightened up a little bit. Look, so this barge, this long-awaited barge, is now there in Falmouth. It'll be moving over to Dorset, presumably in the next few weeks. And there's going to be 500, a minimum of 500 people on that barge. But given that we receive sometimes 1,000 people over a weekend or even more, I don't quite get how that's going to really touch the size. We are going to need more barges, aren't we? And when you break that down and you go, OK, so it's costing us, what is it, around £6 million a day or something on asylum seeker hotels? Well, the barge itself, the mooring of that barge and the just cost of having people on is something like 20,000 a day, from what Jeff was saying there. And that is just one barge, right? I'm not convinced that it is going to work out drastically cheaper than what we've been seeing before. What is fascinating for me, though, is that it's not just places like Dorset where they're up against it because there's a Conservative government there and they're saying that they don't particularly want it in their area for the obvious reasons, public safety, etc., and they don't really want quite literally a boatload of illegal immigrants just in their ports, and they think they'll damage tourism. But when they're talking about putting them in places like the Wirral, which has got left-leaning politicians, they are saying that they don't want it because of human rights grounds. They don't want to be associated with keeping people in abominable, as they say, human rights conditions. Look, is one barge on its own going to be a deterrent for people crossing the channel? And if the answer to that is no, then presumably we're going to need more barges very, very quickly. But it's not just the illegal side of immigration that we're focusing on here right now, because it all ties in, really. We're potentially going to need a lot more barges, but turn them into boutique, gentrified water living for people, because immigration experts are saying that net migration, so this is the legal stuff, could hit a record high of 675,000 people. That is double the pre-Brexit peak of 331,000 8 years ago. And experts have suggested that a steep rise in foreign students and humanitarian visas may explain the potential record high for 2023. Do you buy that? Do you think that that really is the reasons behind it? People coming from Ukraine and Afghanistan and Hong Kong, who we offer asylum to, and understandably so in many cases, is it foreign students and bringing over dependents as well? That number does seem really excessively high, and it opens up a whole different kind of worms, doesn't it? Time and time again. What about the infrastructure of this country? I have already spoken, and I will speak again, about the 700,000 people who just recently have missed their mortgage payment or are unable to pay their rent. We talk about a massive backlog in the NHS, don't we? We have a massive crisis when it comes to our transport systems and various different aspects of our infrastructure. And does anyone maybe think that there is some kind of correlation between 675,000 people arriving in one single year, plus the illegal side of the immigration, and the mess that we find ourselves in when it comes to our infrastructure and our inability to build? Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Joining me now is immigration consultant Dean Morgan. Dean, thank you very much. This is an astonishingly high number of people. I very much doubt that many people who voted for Brexit first time would have thought that years on we will be talking about this kind of number now, almost double the pre-Brexit peak. What do you put down as the main contributory factor for a number estimated to be around 675,000 people?
No, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on today. I mean, basically, since Brexit, you could see that the changes in the immigration rules, the government was taking into consideration the lack of free movement for low, medium and high skilled workers coming from Europe that the British employers were used to, over many decades. Once that's been taken away, a lot of companies are approaching us now saying we just can't find the staff, low, medium or high skill. What do we do? Well, the immigration rules changed post-Brexit so that it was easier for companies to get a sponsor license and to sponsor people coming in. The majority of those figures, in my opinion, understanding how tough the system is now to come here legally, I would say maybe I would guess 90% of people in the future, post-Brexit, with the current immigration system, will only come here if they fill a skill shortage for a UK employer on a skilled worker visa. 5% will marry someone and come in on a UK partner visa, and 5% will come in as a student, then get a graduate visa for 2 years. And if they can fill a skill shortage, a British employer can keep them on a skilled worker visa. But that really is the only legal main ways.
There does appear to be something just a little bit suspect going on here for me, because if I look around now, we have got a housing crisis. I mean, that is well documented, and that means that we've got a crisis in home ownership and we've got a crisis when it comes to renting. And so we have people here already to fill job vacancies, and we look at the unemployment stats and they're not particularly grim, really, comparatively to other times in history. 675,000 people in 1 year. I'm sorry, but all of these people cannot be coming here to work, and where are they living?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, the housing stock in this country, there's always been a housing shortage. I wonder why the people in Parliament, don't build more houses. I mean, again, is it because of investments and they don't want to dilute the investments? But I'm 43. I've lived here all my life. I can't remember a year we didn't have a housing shortage. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe the 80s, early 80s, but not since then. Like you say, the schools, the infrastructure isn't there. A lot of Europeans have left, like a lot have gone back to Europe. But is that equating to 600,000 a year? Probably not. And so it is not sustainable in the long term. But the problem is the British people have to decide, like the government needs to lay out the ability for private sector to be able to start building more schools and to do public-private partnerships and build more houses and this kind of things. So far, they've been incapable to kind of do it to the scale it needs to be. But the British people, I think, have never been given an honest debate about where we go from here. Our economy is in tatters. The future's pretty bleak economically. Well, here's the problem. We're not having enough children. And if we want to maintain our standard of living, we need to bring people in that are going to do the jobs, that are going to be building the businesses, that are going to pay the taxes to do all this.
But
we're not having enough children.
And one of the... I think you've hit the nail on the head in a sense, because one of the key reasons why a lot of British people aren't having enough children, we're not. I did the birth rate stats a few weeks ago, actually, and they are shockingly low. Time and time again, it's home ownership. And we tend to have, I think, perhaps more so than in some other cultures, I'm not being too general here, this is a common reality, perhaps it's more ingrained and interwoven into British culture that the natural order of events is things like marriage, home ownership, babies, right? And if you are now struggling to afford the cost of a wedding, all right, certainly not being able to afford a home, then you don't tend to get the babies. Whereas that is not the same in a lot of other cultures, right? And so I just wonder whether or not it is just a completely self-defeating thing from start to finish, and we're trying to prop up our economy with inflated growth figures because we can go, look how many people we're inviting into our country, and it's sticking plaster, sticking plaster, sticking plaster, but actually the whole thing's going to come crumbling down at some point soon.
You know, I think that's what everyone's worried. I think everyone kind of knows the barn looks a little bit rotten at the moment. It doesn't want to take much to kick it in, is it, really? You know, what is the good news that you get to report every day? Yeah. So, I mean, all I'd say, though, is about this, is that this is the problem. The debate the government should be having with the people is you have a choice, Britain. Either we do something where you're going to let go of the historic ties, you're going to get over, you know, you being the majority people if you're Anglo-Saxon, but you're going to maintain or try to maintain your standard of living, and we can try and, you know, turn around the cost of living crisis and things like that, or you pull the drawbridge up, you don't have people coming, but this is going to hit GDP and the cost of living in the future. And I think most people want to provide for their families and set up for the future, for their retirement and things like that. I think if it was put in that way, it would be different. Instead, it's never discussed. You're racist if you bring it up. And therefore, we end up in a situation where there's a lot of misunderstanding of what's going on and what the options are, because you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I really appreciate you coming on and saying that, because I think that is one of the main reasons why we're in such a mess on multiple different fronts, because instead of confronting an issue dead on, and it's actually quite insulting to the vast majority of the British public, because the vast majority of the British public are perfectly capable of having a discussion like this without it turning into the old, you know, racist tropes, or without, you know, it becoming offensive to people. But you need to have, and instead of it, we end up with this kind of ridiculous sticking plaster politics from every single major element of our society. Nothing gets done, no one's happy, and you wake up one morning and nothing's flipping working. Anyway, Dean, thank you very much. Dean Morgan there, he's an immigration consultant. Right, OK, you are with me, Patrick Christys on GB News, and up next we will get the latest on the government's pharmacy plan. Here we go, yes, another sticking plaster potentially. Look, will this work or won't it work? If you're struggling to see your GP, or you've got a big waiting time when it comes to your NHS treatment, this, the government is hoping, will solve that problem, or at least go some way to solving it. But please also don't forget to get involved in our Twitter poll. Are you Team Boris or are you Team Charles? Because apparently they went toe-to-toe, quite literally, when it comes to the Rwanda migrant scheme. I'll bring you the results at the end of my show. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, maybe the Prime Minister has got a solution for you, because he's got a plan to free up 7 million GP appointments every single year by allowing people to get treatment for common conditions at pharmacies. I'm going to run through what those conditions are very shortly. This initiative, though, doesn't come cheap. 645 million quid. We're lobbying that our health service again, aren't we? Would expand pharmacy services to also allow them to prescribe more medications, perform blood pressure checks. It comes just the day after we were hearing about 240 million quid. Where's all this money coming from? To essentially update the phone services at your local GP with a view of you, therefore, being able to get a GP appointment or being diverted to a better source, a quicker source, as quickly as possible. Get those waiting times down. With me now is Dr. Jess Harvey, an NHS GP. Thank you very much, Dr. Jess. OK, is this going to work?
Oh, do you know, I admire their optimism, but I don't want to sound cynical, but I hope it will. But at the end of the day, what they're not doing is increasing the workforce. What they're not doing is giving us more money to employ more nurses, more doctors, more other health professionals that can help out with people's health problems. I think it is good that pharmacists are going to be able to have more access to medications to prescribe for those minor ailments, and I think that will certainly provide a good access for people. But at the end of the day, I think what people are requesting is that they have more access to GP appointments with us and with our nurses and other staff, and I think that's what we really need the money to do.
Yeah, what this does not do is increase the number of GPs. And I can't help but wonder, for the near £1 billion that we are now spending on new phones and pharmacists doing more, really, whether or not we could have paid more GPs.
Yeah, basically. I don't know what to say to that other than I agree. It's funny because we've got fancy phone systems that are there. What we're short of is people to answer them at the end of it, because people don't want to work on reception because receptionists get such a hard time and get so much abuse. So that's certainly an area that I think could be improved on. At the end of the day, having a phone system that calls you back quicker, that actually a lot of surgeries have already paid for out of their own money, isn't going to change the outcome at the end of it. And that's what I'm sure your viewers really want to have happen, is have much quicker access to us. It's not for the want of us trying. I can promise you that there are more appointments happening than ever before, but demand is just outstripping capacity. Until you can increase that capacity, then things aren't going to change.
What would you say, Dr. Jess, then, to people who go, right, what the government here is doing is making sure that the GP's receptionist sorts the wheat from the chaff before it gets to you. Pharmacists are pulling their weight, and the members of the public are having to suck up the fact that they might not have the comfort from seeing a GP every single time they want to. They'll have to go to the pharmacist, for example. That those people are doing their bit, and GPs now are going to have to step up to the plate and work harder and work longer because everyone else is doing their bit. What would you say to that?
I don't think GPs could work any harder. I think if you've got a system that's already working at capacity, how can you increase that? That's like saying that someone's going to work 110% where you can't. And there's a reality in that people want and expect, and I think should expect, us to be working safely. And if you expect us to then just say we already deal with 40 patients a day, and you say, right, OK, why can't you just deal with 60? Well, how does that happen? Because the time that we're going to be seeing those people is the same. We're already working sort of 10, 11, 12-hour days as it is. So we haven't got the increased capacity ourselves to do any more. So we are working at 100%. There is no more that we can do. I think it's great that there are other health professionals, and I think recognising that is a really good thing. We've got lots of health professionals working in our surgeries, like pharmacists, physios, dietitians, physicians associates, all of those people who can all help. And you're completely right in that respect. And I think it is time that we acknowledge that.
Is there any truth to the notion that a GP can earn decent money on the NHS and then, say, work 3 days a week privately? Is there any truth to the idea that if GPs, all of our existing GPs, only did NHS work, that we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in?
I don't think that's entirely true, and I think you could also say that of hospital consultants, because a lot of them do private work as well. I don't actually know any of the GPs locally that I work with that do private work, and some of us have other jobs that are leadership jobs, but those are jobs that have been created because that's how the NHS works and gives out funding, and that's how we create new structures and run the health system effectively. So some of us do have other jobs, but those are still working within the NHS. If all GPs all work 7 days a week and work 12-hour days for those 7 days a week, would they have more appointments? Yes. Would you have a lot more people going off with stress and burnout? Yes. Would you have people working safely? No. And is that the sort of health system that you want to work in? No. And how are you going to recruit trainees into that? If you told a trainee, right, you're never going to have a break, you're going to work horrible hours, it's going to be a horrible environment, and people are just going to be abusive and just have a go at you the whole time and tell you that you're not very good at your job, who would want to go into that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have just described, unfortunately, the job of my producer. But there we go. Dr. Jess, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much. It's Dr. Jess Harvey there, who is an NHS GP. So, anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Look, don't go anywhere, because up next, we will be discussing fox hunting. Because according to a group of vets, believe it or not, the hunting ban has caused a catastrophic decline in foxes in the UK. Is it the best thing for foxes to hunt them? And Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said that people don't care about woke. That's going to be a good one. Right now, though, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The Information Commissioner's Office says it won't be taking any action against Lancashire Police over its disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wire in February. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also says it's identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway. Its findings will be published in the autumn. The Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the Coronation after it was criticised for arresting 6 Republican protesters ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrests as unfortunate, but stressed he supported the arresting officers' actions. The force confirmed the individuals face no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. The Prime Minister has also said he supports people's right to protest, but says the new laws are needed to protect against serious disruption. And the former Prime Minister of Pakistan has been arrested by anti-corruption police in Islamabad, his supporters being told, shut the country down. Footage has emerged showing paramilitaries in riot gear surrounding him inside a courtroom. The move has led to protests in Mr Khan's hometown of Lahore, and members of his political party are calling for support. Imran Khan was ousted from power in a parliamentary vote in April last year. And the Prime Minister has rejected claims by the Russian president that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak says President Putin is the only person responsible for the invasion that he's called illegal and unprovoked. It follows comments by Vladimir Putin made during a speech at Russia's annual Victory Day parade, where he claimed a so-called real war is being waged and his country is defending its sovereignty. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And a quick snapshot of today's markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.2616 and €1.1515. The price of gold is £1,606.06 an ounce, and the FTSE 100 closed today at 7,760 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, Investments That Matter.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, right, so we've got loads coming your way, including a big debate on fox hunting, because a group of vets have been saying that actually the fox population has declined massively. I would have thought, possibly like yourself as well, unless maybe you are much more intelligent than I am, which is a low bar, let's be honest, is that fox hunting would have depleted foxes' lives and existence, and that actually banning fox hunting would mean that we would have a surge of rural foxes, and indeed the urban fox, which is plaguing many urban areas now. But no, apparently farmers are just shooting the living heck out of them on a much greater rate than they were when they were hunting them, and now actual vets have come out and said that the thing that we need to do is possibly bring back fox hunting, and all of this, of course, is according to a letter signed by a group of vets. So I'm going to be having a debate on that shortly, all right? But what I wanted to bring to your attention earlier on was another article that caught my eye earlier, which is that supposedly now, with this work-from-home culture that we had during coronavirus, now 40% of people, shock horror, are saying, actually, I really regret choosing to work from home. I'm lonely, I'm depressed, it's contributing towards my marital problems, it's contributing towards everything, there's no escape, I maybe live in a one-bedroom flat in some kind of city somewhere, and my home is my office, and I'm sick of it. And so I went out and about earlier on to ask people whether or not they think that working from home is actually affecting them. Are they more or less productive? Let's play the clip.
I think working from home poses a lot of positives, but also negatives. I think it's personal preference. I don't work from home. I'm a hairdresser, but my husband does. And it works well for his career, but it doesn't for mine.
No, I think I need those days to get away from, like, office workers, you know, because you get a lot of people who, like, ask you questions on, so you need, like, the day where you can kind of turn off the I am and just work. So I work 3 days in office and then 2 at home. So I think it helps me with productivity overall. Like, I don't know that I'm necessarily more productive, as productive. But yeah, I definitely don't think I could do fully work from home.
And I personally like working from home. You know, I've got a young family, so it's really easy to, you know, look after the kids, you know.
If your boss or your next job, whatever, said to you, look, you've got to work in the office every day, would that be a no-no for you?
Yes, it would, yeah. I wouldn't consider that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to have a good, you know, flexible work-life balance, and I think things have moved on, you know, in the last couple of years. You know, I think the genie's out of the bottle, and you can't really put it back in now. You know, it's So yeah, it would be a deal breaker for me. Yeah.
Actually, you don't need like the time in the morning and in the evening to, you know, travel to the office, and I don't know. I think you just have like more time in the end.
It was one of those ones, though, as soon as I started doing it and asking them the question, you being honest, are you more or less productive working from home? And you could just see them all realise clearly that their boss might see that, and they're hardly going to come out and say, yeah, you know what, I actually spend all day in my pants drinking wine. But there we go, anyway, some worthwhile content. According to The Telegraph, the hunting ban has caused a catastrophic decline of foxes in the UK. This comes as vets claim the fox population has plummeted in the wake of the 2004 Hunting Act. Ironically, Jeremy Hunt, who's our now Chancellor, a couple of years ago advocated for bringing back hunting, which made a sensational headline at the time. I hope it happens again so we can reel out Hunt on the Hunt. But as they call for the government to launch a scientific review, more than 100 vets have written to ministers warning that despite decades of intense debate, there is no research that backs up the arguments as the most humane way to control fox numbers. So, do we need to bring back fox hunting for the sake of the foxes? Joining me now is firearms dealer and writer Diggory Hadoke and Animal Rising spokesperson Robert Gordon. Diggory, I'll just ask you, should we bring back fox hunting?
It's never going to happen. Fox hunting was banned
for emotive reasons. There were never any scientific reasons behind it. It was purely moral outrage and a bit of class warfare, in my opinion. It was something that Tony Blair threw as a sop to the left wing of the Labour Party, because it enabled him to get their backing to do other things that he thought were important to get done. It's very difficult to put this back on the list of freedoms once it's been taken away. I think getting parliamentary time for it would be very difficult, and I think it's got such a bad reputation in the country at large because people are largely big on emotion and weak on facts when it comes to making these sorts of decisions. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, exactly. For anyone who thinks I was just texting on my phone there, talking about being weak on facts, I was reminding myself of a couple of them. That's what I was saying. So more than 100 vets have written to these ministers now, and what they are saying is that the fox numbers have actually plummeted. So it was signed by 103 vets, and they're saying that the fox population is at its lowest level, dangerously low levels. And that's what I want to ask you now, Robert. Do you think that there is a case? I mean, I think I can guess the answer here, but do you think there is potentially a case to bring back fox hunting if it actually means that more foxes, bizarrely, come into existence in the first place?
Why here isn't that fox hunting's been banned and populations are declining. I think it's that they're being shot way too much, way too excessively. And there are much better solutions. It's not a binary choice. Do we shoot foxes or do we hunt them with hounds where we know they get torn apart and it's quite vicious? Or maybe there are better solutions. Maybe, we transition to a plant-based food system, we can rewild the freed up land, and we can return the habitat to the foxes, who actually, play a really crucial ecosystem function, 100%, yeah.
Is there not a degree in arguing to say the foxes need to be killed somehow? Because it is essentially pest control, whether it's hunting or shooting, isn't it?
Well, yes, I mean, fox hunting started off as a method of pest control, and it was a very efficient way of getting rid of the weak foxes, these injured foxes, and the sick foxes and the old foxes, which is what hunting did. Very few fully grown, healthy adult foxes were killed by hounds. So in that case, it actually did keep a healthier population of foxes. Now, people were warned right at the beginning when this idea of banning fox hunting was mooted that more foxes would die as a result of it. People closed their ears to that, but it was made very clear that what happens when foxes aren't controlled by hunting is that landowners, farmers whose ewes and lambs are preyed on by foxes, even the RSPB, who acknowledge that ground nesting birds and waders are heavily predated by foxes, as are leverets and all sorts of other vulnerable species. The way that they're then controlled is by shooting, and shooting is less discriminating. You go out at night with night vision equipment. A lot of the time, you spot a fox, you shoot it, whether it's old, whether it's young, whether it's sick, you shoot the foxes you see. And we knew this was going to happen. It was well signposted when the ban was first mooted all those years ago.
So, Robert, in your blissful utopia of a rewilding world and a plant-based diet, etc., to be fair, how do you account for things like rapid population growth amongst populations like foxes, which could have a huge impact on other aspects of the ecosystem? I mean, it's a lovely idea, but is it practical, Robert?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few considerations here. The first is that since the hunting ban in 2004, hunting actually does still continue because it's a very weak form of legislation. So the majority of hunts still continue to hunt illegally now, but under the guise of what's called trail hunting. So hunting and shooting is still happening simultaneously. So the problem here is excessively shooting the foxes when we should be giving them land back to exhibit their natural behaviours, their natural predation.
When you say giving them land back, can I just ask Robert, sorry, just quickly, sorry, Robert, just when it says comes about giving the land back to the foxes, what land have we taken from foxes, apart from, like, building towns and cities where humans can live? I mean, if you just fly over England, you see huge swathes of the countryside. I mean, what land do we need to give back to foxes?
Yeah, so these huge swathes of countryside that we see are actually, managed farmland. And we know that if we transition to a plant-based food system, so much less reliant on animal products, that we can free up a significant amount of that land, because animal farming is incredibly inefficient. It's not a good way to feed ourselves. We know as well it's not pleasant for the animals themselves.
Would the animal farmers not have a job, Robert? Sorry, but this is all very well and good, rewilding for the foxes. But I mean, those animal farmers, that's their job. So if we stop doing that, then they starve to death.
Well, nobody wants that, obviously. But at the moment, farmers are supported by a subsidy system. And so instead of using those subsidies to incentivise the continuation of animal farming, we can incentivise better management of the land, rewilding, growing fruit and veg, which uses significantly less land. 50% of the land in the UK is grazed. It produces very few calories.
OK, and I wonder if, Diggory, here we've identified a key ideological difference, which is that instead of the countryside being, from what I can gather, largely subsidised by the taxpayer so that people can rewild it for foxes, Diggory, some people would argue that we can hunt or shoot foxes so that the farmers that are already on there can have their business. And maybe also, dare I say it, the fox hunt was a part of British culture. I must say it's not one that I found particularly tasteful, but whether it was a part of rural British culture, Diggory.
It was, and it's not a part of British culture that I was ever much associated with. I don't like horses. I wasn't associated with the hunt in any way, and it really wasn't my kind of thing. But from a dispassionate view, I would always look at things like this by saying actions have unintended consequences. And in order to prevent people from doing something which they're doing and which they've been doing for a very long time, it's not enough to just say, it makes me feel icky, I don't like it, I'm morally outraged by it. You have to show objectively that that doing this will have the effect that you want it to have. Now, this was never on the cards with fox hunting. It was always that people were told from the word go. Hill farmers who have sheep and they have lambs giving birth in the open, which are vulnerable to fox predation, will shoot them. And they have no other choice now. And as I say, shooting is a much less discriminatory way of controlling the animals, but it has to be done. But foxes are territorial. Once you stop shooting them, they will move in from other areas. And I just wonder what a good population for foxes would be in these people's minds.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Look, both of you, thank you very much. Good discussion now, good debate. Diggory Hogay here is a firearms dealer and a writer and Animal Rising spokesperson. Robert Gordon. Now, you're with me, Patrick Christys, and I'm going to finish the show with a really fascinating story, I think, about Keir Starmer, who has said that people don't care about woke issues. Forget about the culture wars, he says, people care about other stuff. I'll be discussing this with Emma Webb from the Common Sense Society. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't move.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, fire
famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
News.
It's result time, people, and throughout today's show, we've been asking who do you support in this alleged clash between the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the former Prince Charles, now, of course, rather famously, King Charles, over the government's Rwanda scheme. So apparently they went toe-to-toe and Boris Johnson squared up. I was asking you on Twitter whether or not you were Team Boris or Team Charles. 27.8% of you back the King, but Bojo bites back with a whopping 72.2% of the vote. So 72.2% of you are indeed Team Boris over the Rwanda scheme. Now, moving on. Sir Keir Starmer has reportedly told his top team that woke issues do not matter to the public. And he seeks to build on his party's strong performance in last week's local elections. The Labour leader believes the Conservatives have made a strategic blunder. Essentially, he thinks people don't care about woke. I'm joined now by Emma Webb from the Common Sense Society. Now, Emma, we're a bit pressed for time, so I will just throw it straight over to you on this. Is he actually right? Do people not care a bit more about the NHS and the education system and transport and all of that jazz than they do about, I don't know, whether or not there's a man swimming in a women's swimming competition? Your views?
I'm not sure whether he's trying to be strategic here or whether Sir Comrade is spending too much time with his bourgeois circle. I think he's just wrong. I think this does matter to the British people. John Hayes absolutely hit the nail on the head when he said that, yes, of course, the NHS, cost of living, those things do matter to people. Those are issues to do with how we live our lives. But the issues surrounding culture, cancellation, those things that Starmer has called woke issues, that was a culture war, we have to add, it was started by the left. And that the Conservatives are just in a defensive posture over this, not just Conservatives, but your average Brit. I think, John Hayes is right that we do care about these things, but ultimately those issues are about who we are as a people. And that does matter to the British people. I think that he has taken a look at these local election results and thinks that the Labour Party are in a good running for the next election. And as John Hayes pointed out, he thinks that if he says that these things don't matter, then it won't matter too much that the Labour Party isn't actually able to be as patriotic as the rest of the country. But I think we all know that he's wrong.
So why should people arguably be more bothered about whether or not someone should have to take the knee or whether or not we should, not mispronounce someone than they should about 7 million people waiting for NHS treatment?
I think it's possible to be worried about both of those things. So Starmer is setting up this strange false dichotomy to try and minimise the fact that the left and many people within his own party have been pushing for these whereas we're calling it woke issues. I no longer like the term woke because I think it makes it sound less serious than it actually is. But things like, for example, Keir Starmer not being able to straightforwardly say that women are don't have a penis. That's one example. I think the Labour Party are not able to be robust on these issues. And so he seems to think it's in his electoral favour if he minimises them. But I don't think you can minimise them because we can tell the British people do care about these things. They also care about waiting lists, the NHS, cost of living and all of that. You can have both.
Good stuff. Emma, thank you very much. Short and sweet, but I think you hit all the key points. Emma Webb there from the Common Sense Society. Just what a way to round off the show. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, everybody who has tuned in for me. Jubes & Co. is coming your way next. Michelle Dewberry will be hopefully getting into the studio and she will be with you for the next hour. Make sure you keep locked onto GB News for a great evening's worth of coverage. As ever, I will be back again tomorrow at 3 p.m. and I will see you then, lovely, lovely people. Thank you very much. Peace out. See you then.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here with your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It certainly turned into a lively afternoon out there with heavy showers and thunderstorms. They will ease overnight before we do it all again during the next couple of days. The air highly unstable at the moment, low pressure in charge. That low pressure does contain a few weather fronts, but by and large it's sunny spells and showers over the next few days, and that's how things are looking during the rest of Tuesday. Perhaps some longer spells of thundery rain and hail affecting the south and southeast for a time during the rest of the day. Today, thunderstorm warning in force because of the impacts that this could bring, especially during the evening rush hour. But that clears away during the hours of darkness. Another area of cloud and showers push into the west. 11 degrees here, but mid to high single figures where the skies clear further east. A few mist patches possible in the east of England, northeast Scotland, and certainly quite murky around the coast of northeast Scotland as we begin Wednesday. Otherwise, cloud and showers moving west to east across the UK, and then again some lively downpours breaking out during the afternoon. These showers will be slow moving. They'll contain hail and thunder once again, especially towards the east, and they'll impact temperatures. So where we get the showers, mid-teens, but where we get some sunshine coming through, 19, possibly 20 Celsius in 1 or 2 spots. Then into Wednesday, the showers tend to ease as they push further east, and there'll be a greater chance of clear spells and drier interludes through the night time, but still some showery rain towards the west, especially for Northern Ireland into western fringes of the UK. And once again, temperatures not far from average for the time of year overnight. Mid to high single figures, 11 Celsius in 1 or 2 spots. A generally cloudy start to Thursday. Showers certainly around first thing, especially towards the west, and then those showers breaking out more widely into the afternoon. By Friday, the showers become focused towards the south, with more settled weather arriving just in time for the weekend for many of us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at